Chapter 643. The exquisite boat slowly stopped on the shore. The woman in the pavilion was no longer in the mood to play chess. She looked at Li Tianlan and Huangfu Qiushui standing on the boat, and was silent for a while. Then she said softly, "Old master, I'll go talk to him." DK nodded and said nothing more. The woman turned and left. In the sound of some hurried footsteps, a middle-aged man solemnly walked up to the pavilion with a tray. There was a pot of warm wine and a plate of peanuts on the tray. There was nothing else. The man nodded to the woman and slowly walked into the pavilion. DK had already stood up. His body was straighter and straighter. At this time, he was lowering his head and fiddling with the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard. This game was far from the final stage, so it was natural that the winner could not be seen. The old man held the white chess piece and placed it. His moves were not exquisite, but the black flag in his other hand was frequently used. The strangulation of the black and white chess pieces had completely turned into a one-sided crushing. The old man watched with great interest that the black chess pieces could no longer turn the situation around. He slowly smiled, happy like a child. The middle-aged man held the tray and stood motionless in front of the old man. Looking at his smile, his heart suddenly ached and his voice became hoarse. "Old ancestor, the wine you ordered." "Tonghui, sit down." DK smiled and waved his hand, motioning the middle-aged man to sit down. "How is our Yang in your little bow?" "Very good. Some time ago, they told me that they would go on a trip after graduation." The middle-aged man felt sad, but he forced himself to smile. He was Jiang Tonghui, the younger brother of Jiang Tongye, the patriarch of the Jiang clan. In the Jiang family, he could be said to be the real second in command. At this time, looking at the old ancestor's increasingly strong spirit, his heart was empty. DK's surname was not Jiang. When the old master of the Jiang clan took him to this island, not to mention Jiang Tonghui and the others, even their father was still a child. When they were born, DK had already become the famous Heaven Saber in the Dark World. He had been staying on this island for many years, and because of his existence, the Kanglan Jiang clan had become the most powerful sword-wielding force in decades. Family. DK's surname was not Jiang, but he had the highest status in the Jiang family. Whether it was before or after he sealed his blade, this old man who had truly dedicated his life to Kanglan and the Jiang family had never interfered in the affairs of the Jiang family. Most of the time he stayed in this pavilion, watching the surging river and the mighty North Sea. He was silent, but the entire Jiang clan became extremely confident because of his existence. But today the corner of Jiang Tonghui's mouth moved, and he suddenly whispered, "Patriarch, there's still time." His voice trembled with pain as he muttered to himself, "There's still time." DK, who had sealed his blade and recuperated for more than 20 years, was destined to need time to forcefully recover to his peak state at the age of 90. If he did not want to die, there was still a way. DK glanced at him, and for the first time, a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. "Do you know what you're saying?" Jiang Tonghui lowered his head and gritted his teeth. "Patriarch, I'm not afraid of death. This island of the Jiang family is built with our blood. If possible, I'm willing to personally lead the elites of the Jiang family to fight against Li Tianlan. At worst, you can't represent the Jiang family." DK said calmly. "In the eyes of some people, if I don't fight, no matter how many people the Jiang family sends, they are cowards." "This has nothing to do with cowardice," Jiang Tonghui whispered. "It's whether it's worth it or not." DK raised his head and looked at him. He was quiet and did not say a word. This time, it's obvious that His Majesty didn't do a good job. There's no right or wrong, but he didn't do a lot of things last night. That's why Li Tianlan swept the North Sea today. Strictly speaking, Li Tianlan just wants an explanation. This is a matter of Mount Dibbing. Patriarch, I don't think it's worth it to fight with him. Many people also think it's not worth it. Jiang Tonghui's voice was hurried. DK looked at him and suddenly laughed. "Who else thinks it's not worth it?" Jiang Tonghui's face was slightly pale, and he did not speak. "Wang Xiaoao? Or Wang Qinglei?" DK took the initiative to ask. Jiang Tonghui smiled bitterly, wanting to say something but stopping on second thought. "Stay away from them," DK said calmly. "My surname is not Jiang. but I have always regarded myself as a member of the Jiang family, and the Jiang family has always regarded me as one of their own. Now in the family, I have the highest seniority. For so many years, I have never asked you for anything but recently. DK looked into his eyes. I have to ask you or an order. Stay away from them. I'll talk to your elder brother later. During this time, put down the family affairs and go out to relax. Patriarch. Jiang Tonghui's face changed slightly. Why? To keep you alive. To keep the Jiang family intact. DK snorted coldly and said slowly. How dare you get involved in the internal affairs of the Wang family? Pig brain. It's not clear whether they are enemies or friends. How dare you get involved? I'm not sure about Wang Qinglei, but how can Wang Xiaoyao be so simple? You are a member of the Jiang family, a member of the sword-holding family. It is the responsibility of the sword-holding family to protect the Wang family. But there are some things that you can't touch. Don't you understand? DK paused and laughed at himself. As for me, I'm an old man. Heh. My grandson's son is dating your daughter. What else can I not accept after living to this extent? He flicked a drop of wine from the flagon and wrote 4 words on the table. For hundreds of years, this has been the insistence of the Jiang family. I have lived for a long time, but I dare not live up to these 4 words. You, a young boy, can't live up to these 4 words. You don't deserve it. Do you understand? Loyal, brave, and fearless. Jiang Tonghui looked at the words written by DK and remained silent. DK waved his hand, go. Jiang Tonghui stood up, slowly turned around, and walked out of the pavilion. It was windy on the Kanglan River. The wind blew through the pavilion, and the rain poured in diagonally. DK sat alone in the pavilion, picked up a peanut and put it in his mouth. He looked at the 4 words on the table in silence for a long time. The boat stopped on the shore. Li Tianlan still stepped on the flat ground with his bare feet, quietly staring at everything on the island. Countless sword intents flew from the center of the island and gathered in front of him, layer upon layer. The sword of the void was constantly vibrating in the center of the island, forming a connection with the 13th floor. From the shore to the center of the island, almost all the sword intents passed through was the domain of the 13th floor. Li Tianlan penetrated through. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The domain felt everything around it and was silent for a long time. Your Highness, you've worked hard all the way here. I've asked people to prepare a banquet. If you don't mind, you can taste the special delicacies of our Kanglan River. Jiang Tonghui, the patriarch of the Jiang family, led the 2 to the island, his voice calm. The patriarch of the Jiang family, who was over 50 years old, could be said to be the most low-key one among the 7 sword-holding families. Before DK sealed his saber, the Jiang family was completely shrouded by DK's saber light. After DK sealed his saber, Dijiang, whose real name was Jiang Hongwei, became more and more dazzling under the guidance of Wang Tianzong. Among the patriarchs of the 7 sword-holding families, Jiang Tonghui was the most easily ignored one. But in Li Tianlan's eyes, he was also the most unfathomable one. Li Tianlan glanced at him and suddenly said, Before I came to Kanglan River, I heard that among the 7 sword-holding families, the Jiang family is the strongest. The saber formation, the sword formation, the raging fire formation, the ice formation, and the thunderclap formation, layer upon layer, can evolve into a real invincible formation. Do you look down on me too much? Or does the invincible formation not need much cooperation at all? In his perception, the island was completely empty. It might not be accurate to say that it was empty. But in all directions, Li Tianlan did not feel any hostility or killing intent. It was calm everywhere, as if everyone regarded him as a real guest in Kanglan River. It's because we think too highly of your highness. Jiang Tonghui said quietly. Even if it's the invincible formation, it can't exert much power in front of the 13 floors. In that case, why bother? The old ancestor is already waiting for your highness. When your highness is ready, the old ancestor will fight with your highness. Heaven knife Deke? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and asked. Only him. One person is enough. Jiang Tonghui said in a deep voice, the old ancestor can't beat you alone, and neither can the Jiang family. If the old ancestor can beat you alone, Why do we need others? Li Tianlan slowly put away the domain of the 13 floors. He had been prepared that maybe he would not meet Dijiang on the trip to Kanglan River, but he did not expect that he would not even see the invincible formation of the Jiang family. Here he only had one opponent. Heaven Knife Deke. This battle was destined to be extremely tragic, but for the entire Jiang family, it was the best. Li Tianlan finally saw the real magnanimity and calmness that belonged to a wealthy family in the Jiang family. Even if the Jiang family did not use the invincible formation and Deke used his saber alone, in the whole Beihai, who dared to say that the Jiang family did not go all out? Lead the way, Li Tianlan said calmly. No matter the outcome of this battle, I have to propose a toast to the old master. No matter the outcome of this battle, I have to propose a toast to your highness. Jiang Tonghui leaned sideways and stretched out his hand, neither servile nor overbearing. If you win, I will propose a toast to your highness's glory. If you lose, I will propose a toast to your highness's courage. Li Tianlan let out a long laugh and took Huangfu Qiushui directly to the buildings on the island. On the island, the Fearless Hall, which would only be opened when the Jiang family received the most important guests, was filled with the aroma of wine and food. Jiang Tonghui took Li Tianlan and Huangfu Qiushui to the front of the Fearless Hall, reached out and said please, but did not go in himself. Li Tianlan did not think much and pushed the door open casually. Under the gloomy sky, the Fearless Hall was lit with soft light. The light shone from every corner of the hall and filled the whole hall. Li Tianlan was stunned. There was a woman sitting in the hall full of light. The woman was dressed in a black ancient costume embroidered with golden patterns. Her sleeves were loose, and her hair was coiled up. Her beautiful face, without any trace of age, was calm. She looked at Li Tianlan quietly with her deep eyes, and her whole person was indescribably noble and peaceful. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of Wang Tianzong on the last night in Eastern Europe. Under the polar night sky, the Sword Emperor, who swept the world, was also dressed in a black ancient costume embroidered with golden patterns. He was also inviolable. He looked at the woman's face. The beautiful face was calm with a touch of majesty, which invisibly diluted the enchantment between her eyebrows. Li Tianlan had never seen her. But this face was indeed familiar. This face was very similar to Wang Yuetong's. No, it should be said that Wang Yuetong's appearance was very similar to hers. His heart moved slightly. Behind him, Huangfu Qiushui's soft voice had already sounded. Teacher. She was a little surprised and trotted to the woman's side. Her incomparably charming little face suddenly became a little aggrieved. She pulled the woman's sleeve, wanting to say something but stopping on second thought. With this word teacher alone, Li Tianlan no longer doubted the woman's identity. The hostess of the Wang family of Beihai. Summer Solstice. It was not DK who was waiting in the Fearless Hall, but Summer Solstice, whom Li Tianlan had never expected. She came to Kanglan in person. Summer Solstice gently held Huangfu Qiushui's palm and laughed softly. Qiushui is lost? Huangfu Qiushui's little face blushed, and she secretly glanced at Li Tianlan. She knew that the teacher was talking about the autumn water sword, but at this time, she felt that the teacher was referring to something. It doesn't matter. Summer Solstice pulled her to sit beside her, touched her soft hair, and whispered, let the old master here get it back for you later. If he can't get it back, you can get it back by yourself when you are strong in the future. Huangfu Qiushui was silent and nodded obediently. Summer Solstice turned to look at Li Tianlan, who still looked calm, and smiled softly. This is the first time we have met. Li Tianlan coughed and nodded. He hated Wang Tianzong, but he had no bad feelings for the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai, who had always ignored the affairs of the world. And because of Wang Yuetong, he always felt a little strange about Summer Solstice. I've always wanted to talk to you, but I haven't found the right opportunity. Summer Solstice got up and poured a glass of wine for Li Tianlan. She sat down again with an elegant and soft posture. Do you have to go to Mount Dibbing? Li Tianlan slowly reached out to hold the wine glass and nodded. I have to go. What if I make a move? Summer Solstice looked at him with calm eyes. You are very strong now, and so is the 13th floor. But I can be sure that if I make a move, you can't go to Mount Dibbing or even leave Kanglan City. Li Tianlan drank up the wine in the glass, looked at Summer Solstice and said seriously, I'm really no match for you now, but I heard that you are in poor health. If you make a move against me, I don't know if I will die, but you will definitely die. As you said, I'm not sure if I will die, but if I make a move, you will definitely die. Summer Solstice said calmly. Li Tianlan was silent for a while. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. After a while he asked, do you dare to make a move? Why not? Summer Solstice asked with a smile. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and said calmly, if you dare to make a move, Sword Emperor would have killed me directly in Eastern Europe. This was a problem that the Dark World was well aware of. Wang Tianzong killed the traitor tyrant in Eastern Europe. But he didn't kill Li Guangtu and Li Tianlan, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. It was also because of this that the Dark World finally determined that Wang Tianzong was in a very poor state. If he was really in his heyday, he would not hesitate to kill Li Guangtu. Even if he didn't kill Li Tianlan, he would completely crush all his foundations. The reason why he didn't do so was that the whole Dark World thought that Wang Tianzong's injury was almost out of control. In the case of his injury not healing, he obviously didn't want to face the complicated situation of the whole purgatory of Heaven Capital, and even the Li family's hidden power for many years after the death of Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu. After all, even if Beihai was not afraid of foreign enemies, there were still internal troubles. I'm not the same as him, Summer Solstice said softly. Women are crazy, especially when they really fall in love with a man. They are willing to do anything for their man, and bear any consequences. Her eyes were indifferent. Tianzong doesn't dare to do it, but I dare. I don't have the responsibility of being a patriarch. I have always been a very selfish woman. After I kill you, I don't care what happens to Beihai or the 7 sword-holding families. In my heart, as long as my man and my children live well, I will be satisfied. Even if Beihai is destroyed, what does it have to do with me? My family or my children are enough. She tilted her head. At that time, Tianzong was not prepared enough and didn't dare to do anything to Li Guangtu. It was I who united with Kunlun City and set off a case of treason. I dared to do what he didn't dare to do. Why do you think I didn't dare to do it? Do you know the identities of the 3 members of the devil troop you met in Qiushui? Summer Solstice looked at Li Tianlan quietly. Before they became devils, one was my father, and the other 2 were my uncles. Tianlan, I sent them out because I really wanted to kill you. Li Tianlan's palm suddenly trembled, and a little wine in the cup spilled out. He looked up at Summer Solstice. Summer Solstice was also looking at him, and there was no expression on her beautiful face. Li Tianlan was silent for a long time before he slowly said, if that's the case. He picked up his chopsticks and pointed to the sumptuous dishes in front of him. Why didn't you kill me? Because I didn't want to, Summer Solstice said with a smile. She meant what she said. She dared to kill Li Tianlan, and she had put it into action. So it was not that she didn't dare, but that she didn't want to. It was not that she didn't want to give up Beihai, but she didn't want to give up Wang Tianzong. Even if it was a lightless world and a dreamless world, he was still there. Even if she couldn't see him for the time being, such a world was still extremely beautiful for her. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and asked, how is the Sword Emperor's injury? Very bad, Summer Solstice said slowly. That sword strike caused him a lot of trouble. That's why I came to see you today. Li Tianlan looked at her and didn't speak. The Eastern European sword strike is almost eternal. The master of Samsara Palace and Xianyuanfeng are part of the reasons for it to be able to do this. The 13-story building is the main reason, right? Summer Solstice said softly. Her tone was extremely domineering, leaving no room for negotiation. I want to take a look at the sword formation of the 13-story building. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He thought about it seriously and opened his palm. Countless sword energy began to change around him. One after another, delicate little swords emerged around him. Tianguang was on Lingtai Mountain. The divine weapon was on Picturesque Mountain. There were 11 swords left in the 13-story building. The 11 swords slowly rotated around him, with some extremely profound law. Li Tianlan looked at Summer Solstice calmly and frankly. He didn't believe that anyone else in the world could understand the 13-story building except him. Wang Tianzong might be able to, but he was destined not to see it. Summer Solstice looked at it quietly for a long time. The 13-story building with only 11 swords had two obvious flaws. But the flaws were so obvious, like some kind of trap, with endless changes. The boundless sword intent built an almost eternal sword formation, with Xianyuan Feng's own spirituality, operating on its own. Summer Solstice couldn't describe that feeling. If she had to describe it, maybe there was only one word. Vast. Vast like the starry sky, it was a kind of almost infinite power. Summer Solstice took a deep breath. Her expression was solemn and even awe-inspiring. This is the most perfect sword formation I have ever seen in my life. Li Tianlan looked at her and didn't speak. Summer Solstice was silent for a while and suddenly said, "I know a name." Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and asked subconsciously, "Who?" "Dongqing Huangtu." Summer Solstice said calmly. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly beat faster. What kind of person is she?" Summer Solstice looked at him with a complicated look in her eyes. "I said I know a name, but only a name. I heard this name from Qin Weibai. Dongqing Huangtu, she said he was the chosen one. She said that in the last battle of Dongqing Huangtu's life, there were people from the Wang family of Beihai, including a woman." Li Tianlan looked at her. "It wasn't me," Summer Solstice said calmly. "And before Qin Weibai mentioned this name, I didn't know who Dongqing Huangtu was. And I can tell you for sure that in the past 200 years, I am the only female invincible realm expert from the Wang family of Beihai. In the past 200 years, including the 7 major sword-holding families of Beihai, I am also the only female invincible realm expert. But I didn't participate in the siege of Dongqing Huangtu. I don't even know who he is. The Wang family of Beihai mobilized all the intelligence systems, trying to find traces of Dongqing Huangtu." Summer Solstice looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. "Do you want to know our conclusion?" The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth moved. Summer Solstice said slowly, "There is no Dongqing Huangtu. There is no chosen one. Dongqing Huangtu doesn't exist at all. This is our conclusion." She looked at Li Tianlan and said in a strange voice, "Then how did the 13 floors come about?" End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 644. For hundreds of years, there were countless truths in the dark world. In this world of the law of the jungle, the strong set the rules, and the rules were the truth. Countless experts rose and fell, and countless truths appeared and disappeared. But from beginning to end, there was only one truth that had never been broken. This was something imprinted in the hearts of everyone in the dark world. The Wang family of Beihai was invincible in the world. For hundreds of years, there were countless ups and downs and countless storms. The Wang family of Beihai had always been the undisputed strongest force in the dark world. The strongest force naturally had the largest intelligence network in the dark world. If such an intelligence network wanted to find a person, or even just find a clue of his existence, it could be said to be a piece of cake. At least, they could get a lot of clues in the shortest time. But Dongqing Huangtu had no clue. The intelligence network of the Wang family of Beihai was spread out. From beginning to end, what they found was nothing. There was no trace of Dongqing Huangtu's existence in the entire dark world. What did this mean? Li Tianlan's eyes were a little dazed. He quietly looked at the 13-story building floating beside him. The sword light of the 13-story building had unparalleled spirituality. It seemed to feel Li Tianlan's mood. The 11 small swords slowly approached and rotated around him more and more docile. The sword chi of every sword was fusing with his sword will. It was natural and flawless. This was a sword formation that completely belonged to him. It was like a part of his body. He didn't feel the slightest bit unfamiliar with it. He couldn't be more familiar with it. Li Tianlan waved his hand. The 13-story building returned to nothingness. He quietly looked at Summer Solstice and calmly said, "I don't believe your conclusion." His voice was steady, but his eyes drifted to other places. He didn't know if Summer Solstice saw his insincerity, but there was a flash of disappointment in her eyes. The whole world was guessing about Wang Tianzong's injury, and summer solstices coming to Kanglan to meet Li Tianlan was enough to explain the problem. Wang Tianzong's injury was not optimistic. After the sword strike in Eastern Europe, he forced himself to return to Mount Dibbing, but his injury was not stable. The internal injury that could almost threaten his martial arts foundation was constantly worsening. Otherwise, summer solstice would not have come to test Li Tianlan. She mentioned Dongqing Huangtu and saw the sword formation of the 13-story tower, not to confuse Li Tianlan. Instead, she was also looking for traces of Dongqing Huangtu's existence. She wanted to take a look at his sword formation and find something that could help Wang Tianzong. She was telling the truth. She did not find any trace of Dongqing Huangtu's existence. Not only the Wang family of Beihai, but they also contacted Rothschild and mobilized their spies hidden in various dark forces to look for this name. No, there was nothing. It was complete nothingness. The entire dark world knew that in the past 500 years, there had only been 2 heavenly sons. One was the ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai, and the other was the current sword emperor. However, Eastern Europe's sword and the 13-story building clearly showed that there was still a supreme power. Summer solstice hoped to find the source of this power. There might be a way to help Wang Tianzong, but it was clear that Li Tianlan knew nothing about it. Qin Weibai is still in Yuzhou. Xia Ji seemed to be a little disinterested. She knows everything. Why don't you ask her? Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. Whether summer solstice deliberately made his imagination run wild or not, at this time, it seemed that there was a ripple in his calm heart. He stood up and slowly walked out of the door. Summer solstice did not stop him. Huangfu Qiushui subconsciously wanted to stand up, but as soon as her butt left the seat, her palm was grabbed by summer solstice. Huangfu Qiushui was stunned and looked at Li Tianlan's back blankly. Summer solstice's palm was very soft, but it seemed to carry great power. Huangfu Qiushui sat where she was and suddenly became a little sad. From autumn water to Tongtian to Kanglan. She didn't know whether she wanted the autumn water sword back, or whether it was her real idea or an excuse. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. It was in front of her. She hadn't got the autumn water sword back. But it was the end of the journey. Li Tianlan's figure was about to walk to the door. His figure paused. Huangfu Qiushui's deep and charming eyes suddenly lit up. She hoped that Li Tianlan could say something to her, even if he wouldn't give her the autumn water sword back. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and said in a hoarse voice, "How is Yuetong?" Huangfu Qiushui's bright eyes dimmed slightly. Summer solstice's voice was calm, and she smiled calmly and elegantly. She has returned to Mount Dibbing. She is in a good state. She didn't cry or make a fuss. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said nothing more. He turned around and walked out. In front of the fearless hall, Jiang Tongya, the patriarch of the Jiang clan, stood quietly. It seemed that he didn't expect Li Tianlan to come out so soon. He looked at Li Tianlan strangely, nodded and said calmly, "Your Highness, the old ancestor is waiting for you." "Where is he?" Li Tianlan asked directly. Jiang Tonghui didn't speak, but his eyes subconsciously looked at the pavilion in the center of the island. The black pavilion was shrouded in the wind and rain, with a touch of incomparable sharpness. Li Tianlan nodded. "Lead the way." The chess game was already messed up. The warm wine was half done. The river went all the way east with the crazy rain, mighty and mighty. DK's old palm gently stroked the railing, squinted at the rushing river, silent like a statue. He could see the fearless hall. He could see the young man brought here, by Jiang Tongya. Some sword intent was emanating from him bit by bit, converging into an ethereal shadow. The sword energy entered the pavilion. DK turned around slowly. In his sight, a figure so young that even DK felt a little excessive was standing in front of the chessboard, looking down at the game in front of him. This was a figure that was as faint as smoke. He stood there and looked extremely real, but the sword will around him caused the entire space to become a little distorted. His face, which could not be considered handsome, was calm, but his whole person gradually emitted an indescribable temperament. It was temperament, not aura. It was a kind of natural elegance or elegance that was revealed bit by bit with each of his actions. Like a kind of light breaking through the night, It was slowly but irresistibly radiating. Your Highness is so elegant, it's admirable. DK smiled, without hostility, but extremely calm and gentle. The young man pointed to the chessboard in front of him, and shook his head. Your Highness, do you know chess? DK asked. I don't. He turned around and looked at the old man. Heaven Saber? I'm de Quebec. DK chuckled. He was silent for a while and nodded. Li Tianlan. You're just one of his sword intent. DK laughed. But standing here, you're still Your Highness. He poured himself another glass of wine and took a small sip, feeling very nostalgic. Li Tianlan looked at him calmly and said in a flat tone, I suddenly thought of my grandfather. He said quietly, in that camp every time he drank he was like you. No, he was even more stingy than you. He could drink a bottle of poor quality liquor for half a year. Your grandfather? DK thought for a moment and laughed. I didn't have much contact with him. But that little guy can support the Li family to this point. He is indeed a hero. Little guy, Li Tianlan looked at Di Jiang and did not speak. Since he was a child, his grandfather had always been called Senior Li by others. It was the first time he had heard such a sentence from the little guy. Don't look at me like that. It's not too much for me to call him little guy. I had a good relationship with your grandfather's father in those days. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched and he did not speak. DK did not seem to be in the mood to talk about the past. He drank up the wine in the glass and then again. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. He took out a glass. There was not much wine in the flagon. He poured it out patiently. There were exactly 2 glasses. DK smiled and pushed a glass of wine in front of Li Tianlan. He chuckled and said, I'll drink the last glass of wine in my life with Your Highness. Li Tianlan did not move. Now he was just a sword intent, so he naturally could not drink. Di Jiang raised his glass. Li Tianlan thought for a moment, and gently raised his hand. His glass floated up under the control of sword intent and touched Di Jiang's. The wine in the glass disappeared. DK put down the glass. The Jiang family's hospitality is really unexpected. Li Tianlan's voice was calm. He had thought that he would encounter the fiercest battle in the Jiang family since he entered Beihai. The invincible array of the Jiang family, the heavenly saber of the Jiang family, and the Jiang family would use all its strength to stop him from continuing to the north. But the truth was not like that at all. There was good wine and food in the fearless hall. But facing DK, he still did not feel any sharpness. If time goes back 20 years, maybe it will be as you think. DK thought for a moment. But now, I'm old, and I often don't like a tragic ending. If you and I fight, no one in the whole dark world dares to say that the Jiang family did not use all its strength. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment and nodded. That makes sense. Seemingly getting the answer he wanted, DK smiled with satisfaction, and his words became more and more calm. In fact, you have passed the real test of life and death. That woman came to Kanglin was beyond my expectation. You didn't die, which was even more beyond my expectation. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. I don't know what she came for, but if she came, I couldn't stop her. DK said softly. But the biggest possibility is that she came to kill you. If that woman wants to kill you, how sure are you? Li Tianlan was silent. Summer Solstice was extremely young when she entered the invincible realm. After her realm was stabilized, she directly entered the peak of the invincible realm. Even among the experts at the peak of the invincible realm, she was among the top. If she forced a move, even if Li Tianlan had the 13-story building, he could at most die with her, and that was to cause her injuries. As for living, he was not sure. Maybe the whole Beihai doesn't dare to kill you, but that woman doesn't care about it. DK said softly, back then Sword Emperor's father killed nearly 30 people in Summer Solstice's family. There are many stories for her to be with Wang Tianzong. But how much affection can she have for the whole Beihai? Among the 7 sword-holding families, over the years she has a good relationship with the Huangfu family. Her family is from the Xia clan, but she doesn't care about the whole Xia clan. Many people in Beihai will care about the future of Beihai. If that woman goes crazy, she is the most likely to care. Li Tianlan listened quietly. He was silent for a long time before he laughed at himself. It seems that I'm lucky? It seems that I'm also lucky. DK smiled. She won't kill you, so I can wait for you to fight with me. I'm still alive. Why should I let the younger generation of my family bleed? I've never liked a tragic ending. DK took out a sword from under the table. The quaint long sword was crystal clear, like a piece of extremely precious crystal, shining with an extremely gorgeous luster. The Jiang family's famous sword amber. DK looked at Li Tianlan. Today you and I will fight. If you win, you can take the sword. If you lose, your highness's unique skills will be left behind. The long sword vibrated slightly on the table. DK looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. Do you dare to fight with me? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at Quebec. He suddenly smiled and said calmly, please. DK's eyes suddenly lit up for a moment. He reached out and patted the table gently. Buzz. The amber suddenly shot up into the sky. At the same time, Li Tianlan stood up directly. His figure twisted for a moment, and turned into an incomparably sharp and exquisite small sword. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 645. The awe-inspiring sword chi suddenly filled the entire pavilion. Li Tianlan's figure disappeared. The small black sword was surrounded by an incomparably sharp sword light and spun crazily, growing longer and longer. It was like the deepest darkness, rich, pure, silent, and majestic. Its existence was incomparably real. But it was truly meaningless. It was meaningless, it was all illusory. 13 Pagoda, Xianyuan sword. This was the most important and core sword of the 13 floors. It was also the most important reason why Xianyuan Feng could form the 13 floors. The Xianyuan sword stopped. The slender black sword body hovered in the air, carrying with it a majestic and almost endless sword chi. It was proud and piercingly cold, like the king of all swords. DK's eyes flickered. The turbidity in his eyes had completely disappeared, replaced by an almost dazzling light. The strongest sabersman in the dark world for decades was now facing a sword formation that no one knew about. The strongest sword formation, the strongest sword. He had no regrets in this life. Boom! With a muffled but clear voice, DK straightened his body completely. His body straightened and stood up at the same time. It was as if the sharpest blade in the world had been unsheathed. Snow-white blade light radiated from every part of his body. The space was directly split apart, and the ancient pavilion standing in the center of the island was directly reduced to dust. DK had already moved forward. His palm was extremely old, but it was like a bolt of lightning that grabbed the hilt of the Xianyuan sword. For a moment, the entire island seemed to be able to sense the fierce, almost domineering aura spreading wildly. It was the saber light that had been silent for many years, and carried the aura of time. It was also the glory of the last battle of his life, where he no longer had any worries. Jiang Tongya, who was approaching the gazebo, suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the gazebo. Li Tianlan, who had been following him, took a step forward. His figure suddenly disappeared. The next second, the black Xianyuan sword appeared beside Jiang Tongya, and Li Tianlan's real body had already appeared in the pavilion. DK stretched out his hand. The 13-story pagoda spun wildly around Li Tianlan, and the all-encompassing sword energy merged perfectly with his sword intent. He pointed his finger at DK's palm. A black ripple appeared in the entire space as he extended his finger forward. Pure black flashed for a moment before it was completely filled with all sorts of flickering lights. Annihilation form. 2 fingers touched DK's open palm. Like a raging tide, the sword chi surged forward and instantly drowned DK's old figure. The pavilion, the hill, and everything around it were completely shattered by the surging sword chi. The mighty sword will rush through the world like a flood, and the trees around the pavilion were uprooted in an instant. The green land disappeared, and it turned yellow at a speed visible to the naked eye. All the water was evaporated, and the green land turned into a desert under the sword chi. The mighty sword light rushed all the way into the azure billow lake, bringing up a vast wave. The black Xianyuan sword passed through the chaotic space of knife light and sword chi, and appeared around Li Tianlan. The 11 swords slowly rotated around him. With the addition of the Xianyuan sword, the entire sword formation became more and more ethereal and unpredictable. Li Tianlan stood in the air, looking at Di Quebec. He raised his eyebrows slightly. The wild rainwater was evaporating around him. The wind was strong by the river, and the gale was whistling past. Li Tianlan hovered in the air, motionless. His face was calm and emotionless, but his whole person gradually emitted an indescribable elegance. The dragon vein and his swordsmanship seemed to be merging little by little. The 13-story buildings rotated around him, and his surroundings gradually became blurred, as if there was a white mist shrouding his body. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The aura of the sword light was hazy and mysterious, but it made people feel awe from the bottom of their hearts. It was raining, but he stood there like the sun in the clear sky, and his every move carried a light that people could not look directly at. He was like a scorching sun, and also like a real god. At this moment, Li Tianlan could be said to be truly peerless. DK stood in front of Li Tianlan. The two were less than 20 meters apart. After the first fight, the clearest result appeared in front of everyone. The scarlet blood, which was almost dazzling, fell from the sky bit by bit and fell into the desert under their feet. DK's aura was still stable and powerful, but one of his sleeves had been completely torn. At that moment, the saber light and the sword energy crossed each other. Li Tianlan, who was in the 13-story buildings, was not hurt at all, but countless sword energy kept tearing at DK's arm, leaving countless wounds on his arm. DK frowned, as if he was in pain. He slowly raised his palm. From his fingers to his palm, to his forearm. His arm was truly riddled with holes. Countless strands of sword chi were still wrapped around his arm, tearing at every inch of his skin with naked and eerie killing intent. DK raised his head and looked at Li Tianlan. This was the first time he stood in front of Li Tianlan and felt the horror of this young man. Li Tianlan, who was 22 years old and had not yet entered the invincible realm. DK smiled. It seemed that it was not until this moment that he really realized the reality. After many years of sealing his saber, his body was getting old, but he always thought that his saber was not old. But standing in front of Li Tianlan and looking at the young man who was too young but extraordinary, he finally confirmed that as time went by, his body and his saber were getting old. The heavenly son of the age. DK murmured to himself. He looked at Li Tianlan and said, "Your Highness deserves this title." Li Tianlan looked at him quietly for a long time, and then slowly said, "Where is your saber?" DK was stunned. It was not a pretense, nor was it a momentary distraction. It was a simple sentence, and it asked the simplest question. But he was really stunned for a long time. It might not be a long time, but in the nearly 10 seconds of trance and trance, if Li Tianlan wanted to take action, he could kill DK countless times. DK frowned more and more. "Where is your saber?" Li Tianlan asked again. "Heaven Saber de Quebec." How could he be called Heaven Saber without a saber? Saber. DK looked at Li Tianlan and asked, "Where is your saber?" Li Tianlan looked at him quietly. He narrowed his eyes little by little. The mountain-like sword intent surged around him. DK smiled bitterly. He didn't think there was anything wrong. But until Li Tianlan asked this question, he realized that he didn't have a saber. "I'm old and confused," he laughed at himself and said. "I forgot where I put my saber." Li Tianlan entered the Kanglan Lake. He took out amber. However, he had forgotten to take his saber, and he had also forgotten where he had placed it. He had kept his saber for more than 20 years, and no one in the Jiang family knew where his saber was. DK slowly raised his head and said, "Your Highness, I'm sorry. But it doesn't matter if you don't have a saber." He stood in the air and took a step forward. "I am the saber." His figure suddenly became a shadow all over the sky, and a harsh sound exploded in the air. The old man's withered body. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. The shadow had approached Li Tianlan. He raised his blood-covered arm. DK's eyes flashed, and a strong and violent killing intent burst out in an instant. He raised his arm high and chopped down hard. A pale light suddenly flashed between heaven and earth. It was like a saber light breaking through the sky, or lightning flashing across the sky. The saber light seemed to break everything in an instant, and the bright edge fell on the sword formation around Li Tianlan in an instant. The domain where the sword formation was located was almost instantly broken. The saber light that filled the sky and earth rushed into the sword formation like a torrent, rushing in along the two gaps in the sword formation. 13-story building, which had been hidden in the nothingness, suddenly appeared beside Li Tianlan. One after another, the small swords trembled and tottered, but they still managed to maintain some sort of profound rhythm as they spun with difficulty. The Xianyuan sword appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. The black light lit up in the pale saber light. It stabbed straight. One sword broke the sea. That was the most courageous sword light. 13-story building, which had been in a defensive state, rotated. All the swords were aimed at DK in an instant. The Xianyuan sword was like a black lightning in the saber light all over the sky. One after another, delicate small swords appeared beside the Xianyuan sword. The Xianyuan sword grew bigger and bigger. All the small swords merged perfectly with the Xianyuan sword, and became an incomparably huge Xianyuan sword. The stabbing Xianyuan sword shattered the saber light all over the sky. Li Tianlan went completely crazy. The huge sword edge smashed everything and slashed at Quebec. The light all over the sky lit up for a moment, and then completely disappeared. DK began to retreat. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan moved forward, attacked and sprinted. With unparalleled madness and fighting intent, the huge Xianyuan sword seemed to be completely alive, and the frenzied sword intent burst out one after another. 21st blade. The shattering of land. It stabbed straight. It was still a straight stab. The dark light moved forward madly with incomparable majesty, sharpness, and killing intent. Saber shadows appeared one after another in the void. Wherever the dark sword energy passed, the saber shadows were smashed into pieces. DK's entire domain was pierced the moment it touched the Xianyuan sword, and all his defensive means were smashed by the sword light. Li Tianlan's speed was getting faster and faster. After the shattering of land, it was still the shattering of land. The dark sword light broke the wind and rain, the space and the saber light. It was invincible. It was invincible, and there was nothing it could not break. The huge sword edge didn't stop at all, and almost in the blink of an eye, it directly stabbed in front of Quebec. There was no means of defense. The domain and the saber light were all smashed. DK's eyes grew calmer. Silently, he raised his arm that was full of wounds. Clang! With a loud bang, the huge sword edge of the Xianyuan sword directly stabbed the metal arm, with a clear metal roar. DK was stunned for a moment. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows again. In his sight, the flesh and blood on DK's arm fell off bit by bit, but what was revealed was not the ghastly white bone, but a kind of extremely cold and sharp light. It was the metal hidden in the flesh and blood. It was slender, sharp, and radiated brilliance. Heaven saber? Li Tianlan asked. DK looked at his arm quietly. He seemed to think of something and smiled softly. So, the saber is here. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 646. This was definitely the most horrifying scene. The blade of the Xianyuan sword pierced into DK's arm. The dense sword energy peeled off the flesh and blood. Flesh, blood vessels, and mince flesh kept falling off. The extreme pain fell on DK's body. His face was so calm that it was almost numb. The cold sharpness bloomed little by little from the falling flesh and blood. It was bright, dazzling, and carried the deepest danger. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted slightly, and he said word by word, "The devil troop?" Yes and no. DK's eyes became extremely clear. He seemed to remember a lot of things in an instant. For example, he took the initiative to find the old patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, and wanted to accept the transformation, and become a devil to sleep in the Kanglin River. For example, the Jiang family fully opposed it at that time. The Wang family of Beihai and the Jiang family discussed for a long time, and finally accepted an incomplete transformation plan. DK implanted his double sabers in his arms and used about 1/3 of the immortality potion to maintain his life and state. Finally, he ensured the existence of the top combat capability of the Jiang family for decades. So he could not be regarded as a real devil. He had a clear self-consciousness, but he did not have the perverted ability to resist attacks of the devil. DK was quiet for a moment. He also thought of a lot of things, but it was no longer important. What mattered was that he found his sabers. The sabers implanted in his arms. The sharp and slender sabers shone with cold light. These two sabers were already a part of his body. DK felt a familiar aura. It was a familiar aura that had truly fused with his flesh and blood. He looked up at Li Tianlan, who was standing in front of him, and laughed. His smile was peaceful and extremely confident. His voice was almost a whisper, but the vague danger surged in an instant from all directions. You. The slender sabers replaced his arms and were raised. It shouldn't be, he stepped forward. Stay away from me. The sabers fell. So close. The rain all over the sky was illuminated by the saber light in an instant. The howling wind and rain were chopped into countless powder. DK's figure appeared in front of Li Tianlan. There was no residual shadow, no sound. The old man's body was like a ghost. When his consciousness saw the knife light, the bright blade had appeared directly above Li Tianlan's head. The huge Xianyuan blade turned back into a sword formation in an instant. Li Tianlan raised his hand, and the magnificent sword formation blocked the blade. Li Tianlan strode forward, his voice like a dragon's roar. Dragon fist. The moment the sword formation blocked the blade, a fist with a wild sound directly smashed towards DK's face. The dragon-shaped thunder burst out of Li Tianlan's hand, as if to devour everything. DK took a step back and retracted his arms. The saber radiance instantly retracted. Li Tianlan looked up. DK had already appeared hundreds of meters in the air. The old man's clothes were twisted and deformed by the wind, but the two blades in his arms became even more violent. I have two blades. DK's eyes and the edge of his blade shone at the same time. His body was straight as he stood in the air. At this moment, the old man was infinitely close to his peak state. This was the true Skyblade. Split the heavens. The aged voice shook the entire Songlan River like a clap of thunder. DK's arms rose and fell, waving like the wind. Li Tianlan's pupils suddenly contracted. The high sky seemed to be completely torn apart by DK's saber in an instant. Countless cracks appeared in the gloomy sky, and the dazzling snow-white saber radiance smashed down almost crazily with boundless aggressiveness. The gloomy sky was filled with arcs that seemed to be formed by nature. Countless arcs were connected and densely packed, like raging tides, tearing the sky and crushing everything. Everything in sight had disappeared. There was only saber radiance left in front of Li Tianlan, endless saber radiance that occupied heaven and earth. His saber split the sky, and countless saber radiance almost became a part of the sky, pressing down mightily. The 13-story building in the nothingness once again became Xianyuan blade. The pitch-black giant sword swelled and became extremely huge. Under the majestic heavy sword, Li Tianlan's figure became extremely small. He held the sword with both hands and grasped the hilt. Without any retreat or hesitation, facing the saber radiance that covered the whole sky, the extremely condensed sword energy suddenly burst out. This was a move he had never used since he entered the secular world. It was also the most legendary move of the Li family in the dark world. 22nd blade break of the heavens. The huge body of Xianyuan blade rushed into the sky, and the surging sword energy converged into a line. Li Tianlan's figure seemed to disappear. In everyone's sight, there was only a huge black sword between heaven and earth, crazily shuttling through the saber radiance all over the sky. Countless sword energy was smashed by the saber radiance. But the huge black sword was still moving forward steadily, faster and faster, like a black thunderbolt. Pieces of saber radiance were completely smashed. DK was also not surprised. He shook his two sabers and his voice shook the sky, split the earth. His figure appeared beside the huge black sword in an instant. The saber radiance was like a dragon, roaring and rolling through every inch of space in the sky. Push the mountain. The infinite saber radiance was like a blooming flower, blooming and burning endlessly. At this moment, there was only saber radiance between heaven and earth. That was the dignity of the Jiang family for decades, and it erupted with no way out. Pour the sea. The saber light filled the space between the heavens and the earth. Large patches of dark clouds were torn apart, and the entire Kanglan River was surging with the saber light like a wild wolf. The sudden storm was getting higher and higher. In a trance, DK didn't look old at all. His figure was straight, and he was in high spirits. He waved his two sabers crazily, bringing along the killing intent and saber light that filled the sky. Again and again, he slashed at the huge black sword. The huge sword kept rolling and shaking, flashing with sparks. The pale light suddenly condensed in one place. DK's figure disappeared for a moment, and then he appeared above the huge black sword, looking down. Li Tianlan's figure finally appeared. The huge sword of Xianyuan blade had shrunk. The stormy offensive seemed to have passed. He held the sword with one hand, and his whole body was covered with blood. But his body was still straight, and he was still elegant. DK looked at him, and there was only indifference left in his eyes. The saber radiance was gathering, flowing and gathering in all directions. But there was only emptiness in the world without the saber radiance, with the danger of absolute silence. Covered in blood, Li Tianlan closed his eyes, tightly holding the trembling Xianyuan blade in his hand. DK narrowed his eyes and raised the blade. His breath was a little unstable, but his voice was still loud and clear, covering the world. Destroy the world. The surging and converging saber radiance suddenly lit up. The saber radiance illuminated the island, the river, and the clear lake was sparkling everywhere. The infinite saber radiance was no longer pouring, but gathered in all directions between heaven and earth. East-southwest. The cold, heavy, and ghastly killing intent suppressed Li Tianlan like a substance. Li Tianlan's body was stiff, and his hand holding Xianyuan blade was a little pale. The light in the four directions was getting brighter and brighter. The saber radiance that gathered in all directions began to extend slowly. Those saber radiance were very far away. Some were on the river, some were in the lake, and some were distributed on both ends of the island. Within the extremely terrifying coverage, everything belonged to the realm of saber. DK's voice fell. The four saber radiance that extended to the extreme instantly turned into four crescent-shaped light arcs across the world. Thunderbolt, raging fire, ice and storm. The saber of the east was Thunderbolt. The saber of the west was raging fire. The saber of the north was ice. The saber of the south was storm. But in the final analysis, they were all saber radiance. The fatal danger filled Li Tianlan's heart in an instant. The four saber radiance that illuminated the whole island suddenly swept across the world and rushed over. The surging Kanglan River was split into two halves in an instant. The waves on the Kanglan Lake surged into the sky. The saber radiance crossed the island. The heavy earth was instantly split into a gully that was dozens of meters long. The four saber radiance locked onto Li Tianlan and chopped over. The place where Xianyuan blade was the center of the saber radiance. This saber radiance was called Destroy the World. The four saber radiance across the world suddenly collided with each other. At that moment, the sharpness that the Jiang family had hidden for decades suddenly poured into Li Tianlan. Xianyuan blade, with two gaps, was directly smashed into the shape of a sword formation under the violent saber radiance. The saber radiance crisscrossed and flew into the distance, and then instantly circled back. Fast. It was so fast that there was almost no time to react. The four saber radiance crisscrossed and circled back to Li Tianlan in an instant. He stood in the center of the intersection of the four saber radiance, and could only fight it head-on. The sword formation of the 13-story building was on the verge of collapse. The four saber radiance circled back for the third time. The saber radiance raged between heaven and earth. Thick blood spurted directly from Li Tianlan's mouth. The small sword of the 13-story building had been completely dislocated, and his body was covered with blood. The fourth rotation of Destroy the World passed in an instant. Li Tianlan could no longer hold on and knelt on one knee in the air. His body shook and suddenly fell from the sky, with blood all over his body. The blood of the chosen one dyed the sky red. DK's eyes did not change. His voice kept echoing, faint, with a little melancholy. "I've sealed my saber for nearly 30 years, he said softly. "Your Highness, do you know my position in Beihai 30 years ago?" The island below was filled with cheers that were close to losing their minds. Li Tianlan's figure kept falling. His eyes fell on the sky. A glittering and translucent color fluttered in the air and slowly descended. It was the famous sword amber that was thrown into the sky by DK at that time. He heard DK's words, but he was not in the mood to think. DK gave his answer with a chuckle. 30 years ago, I was in Mount Dibbing. At that time, I was the minister of the Heaven Punishment Troop of the Wang family of Beihai, codenamed Heaven Saber. That's me. The 4 huge arcs of light across the sky and earth slowly dissipated. DK crossed his arms and made another stroke. Heaven Punishment. The dissipating arcs of light suddenly gathered again. They changed from 4 to 8, occupying 8 directions between heaven and earth. The 8 saber radiance flashed with cold killing intent, and the center of intersection was still Li Tianlan. The saber radiance that filled the sky and earth was like the sickle of death, stable, indifferent and ruthless, using destroy the world as the foundation to create heaven punishment. This stroke was not as flexible as destroy the world, but its lethality was far greater than destroy the world. The 8 arcs of light whistled wildly and crisscrossed over Li Tianlan. The saber radiance collided with each other and passed through Li Tianlan's body. There was no blood. Li Tianlan's figure on the ground was motionless, like a shadow. It was indeed a shadow. A bloody light flashed in the corner of DK's eyes. Shadow formula. Li Tianlan's real body appeared beside DK in an instant. Sword energy, sword radiance, and sword intent. The sharp swords whistled wildly and turned into an endless torrent in the blink of an eye. The torrent of sword energy drowned D. Quebec. The blood on Li Tianlan's body flowed down with his every move. His face was pale, but there was only madness in his eyes. The 11 small swords of the 13th floor were completely controlled by his sword energy. Each of the small swords completely gave up on defense. Attack. One after another, the small swords shone with various colors of light, and kept shuttling back and forth. The wind and thunder veins in Li Tianlan's body had been stretched to the limit. The sword radiance was flying. The dragon roar resounded through the sky. Dragon fist. Countless dragon-shaped lights spread out wildly. Li Tianlan's figure directly approached D. Quebec. He punched, swept his legs, elbowed, and hit his knees. In an instant, there was a storm of attacks in front of D. Quebec. Different small swords shuttled back and forth, looking for the vital parts of his body. At this moment, Li Tianlan was completely desperate. He couldn't retreat. He could only move forward. He could only attack. He faced the blade and death. Attack. Rush forward. A huge force smashed into DK's body along with the roar of the dragon. The sword radiance and the saber radiance danced at the same time. Flesh and blood splashed in the air, getting lower and lower. Dijiang's figure kept falling in the frenzied attack. His body landed on the shore. The sword radiance flashed, and the dragon roared incessantly. But in the violent attack, the saber radiance kept flashing. DK's figure retreated into an attic of the Jiang family. In less than half a second, the entire attic was completely shattered by the huge force in an instant. His old figure was smashed into the wall of a villa under the impact of the huge force. The colorful flowing light rushed over almost at the same time. Before people could see DK's face clearly, the whole villa had been turned into countless flying debris and dust. Attack, attack, attack. Li Tianlan was unprecedentedly focused and crazy. Houses, attics, trees, and rockery. Anything in front of him was smashed in an instant. It was as if there was an invisible but indomitable giant holding a huge sledgehammer on the island, destroying everything on the island furiously. DK's figure retreated into the fearless hall. The thick pillar collapsed completely in an instant. His old figure appeared on the shore. Countless boats on the shore flew up and kept exploding, like balls of sparks. Dijiang stepped on the water, and his body suddenly sank. Li Tianlan stopped. He stood high in the sky, looking at the water in front of him, panting and silent for a long time. Blood flowed out of his flesh and blood, dripping into the lake of Kanglan together with the rain. The lake of Kanglan was full of ripples. Li Tianlan stared at the water, his body trembling slightly because of the absolute movement. He grew up in the primeval forest of Nanyun, where it was hot all year round. Water. For them, it had always been a real luxury. So Li Tianlan couldn't swim. He would not be DK's opponent if he entered the water. DK lurked in the lake of Kanglin. There was silence between heaven and earth. A subtle whistling sound broke the silence. The glittering and translucent radiance fell from the sky. Li Tianlan reached out his hand. That crystal-clear flowing light was pulled by an invisible force and flew over. Li Tianlan held it in his hand. He held the famous sword of the Jiang family, the amber. The amber was hidden in the nothingness by 13-story building. Li Tianlan became more and more powerful. His figure rushed into the sky. Blood was still falling from the sky. Li Tianlan's speed was getting faster and faster, and he became a small black dot in the blink of an eye. The water of the lake of Kanglin began to surge. Li Tianlan, who had become a small black dot, suddenly fell. Colorful lights lit up in the air. That was the unparalleled sword intent. It was the killing intent that was sharp enough to split mountains and seas. The surging sword light occupied heaven and earth. Only Li Tianlan's steady and powerful voice was left on the lake of Kanglin. Open. One sword to split mountains. One sword to split the sea. In an instant, hundreds of meters long sword light poured into the lake of Kanglin. The whole vast lake was surging, and the sharpness that was enough to tear the space was all poured into the turbulent lake in an instant. It was like a sharpness that could fight against the whole world sweeping across the lake. The turbulent lake was torn apart. The sword light went straight to the bottom of the lake, mighty and powerful. A large amount of lake water suddenly flew up and rushed into the sky, like two water walls towering into the sky. The whole lake of Kanglin was split in half by Li Tianlan's sword. Countless lake water kept surging and rushing into the sky under the obstruction of the sword energy. Li Tianlan landed. The bottom of the lake was wet like a swamp under his feet, but there was no water around. The whole lake was on both sides of him, getting higher and higher. The sword light hidden in the lake and crazily circling directly swept over the moment Li Tianlan landed. Li Tianlan's body took a step to the left. Just one step. It was a very simple movement. But with this step, his body left behind countless afterimages. One after another, black shadows appeared around the blade light. Li Tianlan kept changing his position in the black shadows. In an instant, DK was surrounded by Li Tianlan from all sides. DK stopped the sword light. With blood flowing from the corner of his mouth, he looked at the countless Li Tianlan around him and laughed. Qingfen. It was the oldest name. Now this body movement had another name in the dark world. Desperate Chase. And Tribulation's shadow formula. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and looked at D. Quebec. Do you still want to run? DK was silent and didn't speak. Desperate Chase was the top body movement in the dark world. And shadow formula was even weirder, and could be used at will. If Li Tianlan wanted to run, his means were so abundant that it could even be said to be incredible. Absolute body movement was not invincible. As long as DK's sword was fast enough, no matter how exquisite Li Tianlan's body movement was, it would be useless. But the key was that DK's sword was not fast enough. He broke out in an instant, creating the world, toppling the mountains and overturning the seas, destroying the world and punishing the sky. Under the full outbreak, his state had begun to decline. If he ran, Li Tianlan could catch up. But if Li Tianlan wanted to be a rascal, he could kill DK with his current body movement. The younger generation will surpass the older. DK finally opened his mouth with a little sigh. It's over. Li Tianlan said calmly. He took out the amber. The crystal flowing light flew out of his hand and fell in front of D. Quebec. Li Tianlan reached out and looked at D. Quebec. Give it to me, and I'll leave you a whole body. DK narrowed his eyes slightly. It's not over. He spoke slowly, softly, but with great certainty. Li Tianlan didn't speak. DK raised the two swords that were integrated with his arms. I still have one more move. He looked at Li Tianlan. His state had declined. But he still had one move, the real and strongest one. The last move. Chapter 647. On the island that was torn apart by the blade light, countless people looked up at the sky. DK's voice echoed in the air. This move is called Qianqiu. For decades, the dark world had not seen Qianqiu, eternity, or great tribulation. But everyone in the Jiang family knew what this move meant. Jiang Tongye, the patriarch of the Jiang family, stood near the collapsed pavilion. The surrounding woods had been completely cut up by the sword and saber. The gloomy sky fell, and DK's figure kept rising into the air, getting higher and higher. He flew out of the bottom of the lake, as if he had merged with the gloomy sky. The separated Kanglin Lake fell with a rumble. Large waves kept colliding and surging. Li Tianlan stood on the surface of the lake, looking at DK, who was rising, and at the raised blade. Jiang Tongye knelt down near the pavilion and kowtowed heavily. At the back, Jiang Tonghui, who was responsible for protecting the important figures of the family, also knelt down. All the important figures of the Jiang family knelt down one by one. On the island, in every corner, the guards of the Jiang family also knelt down. Only Jiang Tongye's voice sounded after D. Quebec. It was deep and powerful, with an extremely oppressive force, piercing through the sky. Farewell, old ancestor. Everyone on the island heard Jiang Tongye's voice. Inside the Jiang family, some young people couldn't help crying. Although his surname was not Jiang, he had protected the Jiang family for more than half a century. He did not have the blood of the Jiang family in his body, but everyone was willing to call him old ancestor. He sat in the pavilion all day, and was lonely for half of his life. He never interfered in the internal affairs of the Jiang family. He was not arrogant and smiled kindly all day long. The famous heaven saber in the dark world. Finally, it was time to leave. Behind the Jiang family, Summer Solstice raised her head slightly and remained silent. Huangfu Qiushui stood beside her, holding her hand, and asked cautiously, "Teacher, is the old master going to die?" He didn't have to die, but the old master's body can't support it anymore. Summer Solstice touched Huangfu Qiushui's head, and there was a trace of affection in her voice. Just like the 3 absolute swords in the 24 moves of swordsmanship of the Li family, there is also an absolute saber that belongs to the saber, or the heaven saber. Xia Ji smiled and said, "Immemorial, 1,000 autumns, and great tribulation. For hundreds of years, these 3 styles have been the absolute blade of the blade. Immemorial gravity can be said to be the ultimate force. Great tribulation is the heaviest, and 1,000 autumns is the most balanced. It is the combination of strength and speed. Each of these 3 styles is a real blade of heaven." The corner of Huangfu Qiushui's mouth twitched as she said in a low voice, "I've seen the manuals of these 3 moves." "Yeah," Xia Ji said softly. The tri-invincible saber was originally the Wang clan's saber. It was only in the hands of the Jiang clan that it truly flourished. Everyone knew that the Wang family of Beihai had a real chosen one hundreds of years ago. In other words, the real chosen one founded the Wang family of Beihai. However, hundreds of years had passed, and very few people knew that the prodigy from back then had a younger brother. Just like the relationship between Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaoyao, biological brother. As for the ancestor's brother, he used a saber. Immemorial, 1,000 autumns, and great tribulation. The tri-invincible saber could be said to be the painstaking work of his life. In that era, he had been hidden in the unparalleled light of the chosen one. It was an era when the ancestors of the Wang family of Beihai and the ancestors of the Lin clan represented the real peak combat power. All his talents were hidden in the light of those 2, until he took an apprentice. The saber that belonged to Beihai gradually emitted a light that could not be ignored. And his apprentice was the ancestor of the current Jiang clan. Xia Ji's eyes were a little dazed. At this moment, she looked at the saber light in the air and thought of the sword and saber of the Wang family of Beihai hundreds of years ago. The heaven blade had always been hidden under the sharpness of the sword. It was willing and had no regrets. And in this era, the Wang family of Beihai also had a chosen one. The Wang family of Beihai also had 2 brothers. It was also a sword and a saber. But after all, it was not hundreds of years ago. Now that saber had broken through the invincible realm, it seemed unwilling to be overshadowed, and was trying its best to snatch the style that belonged to the sword. She thought of the gradually expanding cracks inside Beihai, and suddenly felt a little sad. Huangfu Qiushui was also very sad. In the gradually dazzling and finally dazzling light, she saw the last glory that belonged to a martial artist, But more than that, she felt lonely. Every saber of the Wang family of Beihai had an indomitable momentum, and any move of the three invincible saber was almost burning one's life and potential. At his peak, DK might be able to hurt but not die with one move, but at the age of nearly 100 years, he would probably be smashed into pieces immediately. She was a little sad, but she also had some worries that were difficult to speak out. So she hesitated for a long time before biting the corner of her red lips and whispering, "Teacher, Li Tianlan, will he die?" Xiaji glanced at her. Her eyes were somewhat meaningful. Huangfu Qiushui blushed and pretended to look at the sky seriously, but the teacher's words fell clearly in her ears, making her face slightly pale. "If the 13th floor is complete, he won't die," she said slowly. "But in this case, unless the old master shows mercy, I don't see the possibility of his survival based on his current combat capability." Her voice paused. "Maybe he can survive, but his foundation is doomed to be destroyed, and he has no hope of becoming the chosen one." She smiled with an extremely complicated smile. "Recultivate. This is the fate of the Li family. The old master changed a chosen one in his life. Li Tianlan can't feel wronged. But I think he can survive. His kendo is perfect." Huangfu Qiushui whispered. "Wrong," Xiaji said calmly. "His sword intent is perfect. But kendo, his realm is there. How can it be perfect?" She looked at the sky and said no more. In any case, this was the best result. Whether Li Tianlan died or was completely disabled, it was a good thing. And de Quebec, the loyal, brave and fearless Jiang family did not lose any face. DK was destined to die. But he was not defeated by Li Tianlan. With this saber strike, he was only defeated by time, defeated by the passage of time. That was all. She looked at Li Tianlan's figure with some regret. DK was also looking at Li Tianlan. His eyes were also full of regret. The knife light wrapped around his body little by little. The momentum was not as violent as it was, but extremely faint, erratic, strange and unpredictable. "I can't stop this move." The blades implanted in his arms trembled slightly, and his pale face seemed to become ruddy as if it was the last radiance of the setting sun. The almost violent aura kept rising in his body, as if it would never end. DK looked at Li Tianlan. "Your Highness, it's not too late for you to retreat now." "I can't retreat." Li Tianlan looked at DK and was silent for a long time before he said in a calm tone. He slowly took a step forward. Just one step. A lot of blood gushed out of his body directly. Li Tianlan's face became paler and paler, and he frowned tightly. At this moment, there was no knife light between heaven and earth. But the entire world had become an incomparably sharp blade. The sharpness of the blade covered every vital part of Li Tianlan. He could not attack or even move. He stood on the blade of heaven and earth. The only thing he could do was to wait for DK's knife light to fall. Li Tianlan became more and more silent. He stood on the lake and looked at DK's knife. This was a move that DK made at the cost of his life. Li Tianlan had no doubt that the power of this move could definitely make DK return to his real peak, or even surpass his peak state. Could he block it? Li Tianlan was not sure. He had an extremely reluctant answer in his heart. It was reluctant and extremely vague. He did not know the final result of this answer. But he was very clear that he stood on the land of Beihai. And there was no way out every minute and every second. Or move forward. Or die. In the silent rotating blade of heaven and earth, Li Tianlan raised the Xianyuan sword little by little. His arm bloomed with a lot of blood in the process of raising it. But his eyes were extremely calm, even dead. DK was a little moved, but he did not speak. The blade of the Xianyuan sword pointed at DK from afar, and the loud heartbeat rang out unhurriedly. Li Tianlan's voice was calm. "Please." DK sighed slightly and looked at the world around him. It was the Kanglin River and Kanglin Lake that he had seen for most of his life. The vast Beihai was surging and surging. He took one last look at it with great love and attachment. He crossed his two knives and no longer hesitated. Across a distance of thousands of meters, his two knives directly chopped down. The world became silent in an instant. The whistling wind, the messy ground and the surging water. All the sounds disappeared completely. In the completely silent real world, only the blooming knife light flew over with an incomparably dazzling arc of light. The flickering arc tore the world apart and locked on Li Tianlan with the strongest power and the fastest speed. It was spinning. It was flying. It was shrinking. The knife light that was thousands of meters long directly shrank countless times in the blink of an eye. This move was aloof from the world. This move did not bring any damage to heaven and earth. All the power and all the killing intent gathered on Li Tianlan without any waste. Li Tianlan finally saw the real Qianqiu. The real heaven knife. The knife light that seemed to surpass everything kept spinning, with a clear smell of death. The 13th floor without two swords could not stop this move. He could not stop this move either. Death was close at hand. Li Tianlan's mind was blank. In an instant, he seemed to forget everything. He forgot the camp where he had lived since he was a child. He forgot the 24 moves of sword that he had practiced since he was a child. He forgot the invincible manual. He forgot the shadow formula. He forgot the sword of emperor path that Wang Xiaorao had traded with him. He also forgot the notebook that the master of Samsara Palace had given him when he was in Eastern Europe, which recorded all the martial arts experiences of the Chosen One. He gave up the 13th floor. The 11 swords quickly overlapped in his hands and turned into the Xianyuan sword. The moment the Xianyuan sword was formed, it was crushed by the invisible pressure emitted by the knife light. The 11 swords flew around Li Tianlan in a disorderly manner and did not even form a sword formation. The saber light approached Li Tianlan at an unparalleled speed. There was a vast whiteness in front of Li Tianlan's eyes. It was a cold and dead polar land. There was only ice and snow all over the mountains and fields. He thought of the 3 years he had walked thousands of miles. In those 3 years, every exploration, every thought, every success, every thought, every thought, every thought, every thought, every thought. The long road. The footprints kept replaying in his mind. The knife light rushed across a distance of thousands of meters and approached Li Tianlan with a grim smile of death. Li Tianlan reached out his hand casually. The sword intent was mighty and rushed straight to the sky in an instant. Countless sword lights burst out in an incredible and hysterical way in the blink of an eye. The heaven-cutting style. The shattering style. The sky-splitting style. The sea-breaking style. This was his own kendo. The sword energy was layered. His sword light kept changing, like reincarnation. The sword light of the 24 moves of sword kept flying. The power belonging to the immortality seal surged out in the sword light. The 9th sky was endless. In an instant Li Tianlan turned into kendo. The all-encompassing sword Dao. Countless rays of light formed in the blink of an eye. That was the sword light of Shu Mountain. Nirvana sword essence. Phantom sword essence. Great void sword essence. Yin-yang sword essence. It was the sword light of the Jade Lake. Transcendent flying immortal. Unparalleled in all Daos. Heaven-shattering white rainbow. That was the domain of Sai City. Heaven and earth were useless. It was the 9th secluded impasse of Kunlun City. It was the sword of Emperor Path of the Wang family of Beihai. It was Jifeng sword control of the Jifeng sword reigning school. Countless sword lights flashed. It's everything. It was also the purest sword. Hundreds of sword intents gathered together in an extremely disorderly manner. Even Li Tianlan himself didn't know what kind of sword it was. However, this was his strongest move. This was what he had learned all his life. All he had. DK's saber light was subtle and light. Li Tianlan was surrounded by light. It was colorful, and there was day and there was night. Day and night alternated. Li Tianlan held the hilt of Xianyuan Feng. It was like some sort of reincarnation, but also like some sort of continuation. All of a sudden, the 11 swords around Li Tianlan shone with a dazzling light. Graceful aquamarine, silver moon, heartbreak, donghuang, phantom, judgment, twilight, horizon and void. 10 delicate small swords vibrated at the same time. Li Tianlan's Xianyuan sword. He seemed to want to stab forward. However, a vague feeling made him loosen his grip. In the quiet world where day and night alternated, Li Tianlan kept appearing one after another. Each Li Tianlan was perfectly integrated with a small sword. Li Tianlan's real body stood where he was and loosened his palm. 10 swords. 10 shadows. Xianyuan sword. Everything flew out of Li Tianlan's hand. The gloomy sky ushered in the everlasting night in an instant. The night was long. Xianyuan's sword kept recombining with everything and became Xianyuan Feng. Xianyuan Feng cut through the sky like a meteor. At the back of the island, Summer Solstice's body shook violently. She looked at the sword light with disbelief in her eyes. This might be a scene that countless people in the dark world were very familiar with. The meteor-like sword shone with sword light. It was like a moment. It was like an eternity. It was like a dream. Samsara in a moment. The knife light that was enough to tear was instantly shattered in front of Xianyuan Feng. The moment the knife light was shattered, Xianyuan Feng's huge sword body had already leaped a distance of thousands of meters and directly penetrated DK's chest in an instant. Blood spilled wildly. Everything happened too fast. It was as fast as an illusion. DK lowered his head and looked at the blade in his chest with his eyes wide open. Li Tianlan appeared beside DK and held the hilt of the sword. There was no joy of victory on his face. There was no calmness. At this moment, Li Tianlan's eyes and face were full of bewilderment. This is... DK's voice was extremely difficult. Li Tianlan laughed. His smile was a little crazy, a little self-deprecating, with a little inexplicable and confusion. In the face of Qianxiu, he gave up the 13th floor. He gave up everything. He used his own kendo. With his own kendo as the foundation, he simulated countless sword intents that he knew. At that moment, Li Tianlan didn't think about anything. He just wanted to use his sword, his own sword, the most powerful sword, without thinking about the sword in the future. He didn't know what this sword would be like. But at this moment, the answer was extremely clear. This sword directly penetrated DK's chest. It was an extremely strange sword, but it was extremely familiar. Li Tianlan's eyes were extremely bitter. He didn't expect that his sword with all his strength would be like this. Such a sword had leaped over Mormons not long ago, like an eternal light, and pierced Sword Emperor's chest. It was this sword. It was the exact same sword. This was Li Tianlan's full outbreak. It was his own sword. This was the 13th floor. Chapter 648. Li Tianlan had watched the video of Eastern Europe's last moments countless times. The sword light, like a meteor, seemed to fly over from the sky. The sky and the night intersected, eternal and instantaneous reincarnation. That sword tore the sky and flattened the earth, with unparalleled glory, almost eternal glory. That was the strongest sword move of the Chosen One. And it was perfectly replicated that night. Li Tianlan understood the sword formation of the 13-story building, but he could not figure out the essence of that sword move. He could understand it, but he could not imagine what kind of sword move it was. Until today. Until now. He broke out like never before, and countless unique skills intersected with each other. In the sky full of sword energy, he let go of his hand and faced the knife light. The sword energy was like a meteor, penetrating everything in the world. He did not know what kind of sword move it would be, but there was no doubt that it was the peak he could reach at present. He used all his strength, regardless of everything, and went all out without hesitation. At this moment, Li Tianlan stood at the highest point, but suddenly found that this sword move had already existed. What was this feeling? Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. At this moment, his thoughts were extremely complicated. He could feel the sword intent of his sword move. Compared with the eternal sword move in Eastern Europe, it was not similar at all. It was the same. It was exactly the same sword move. The only difference was that that sword move was much more perfect than his. His sword move was just a prototype after all, but the foundation that supported the burst of sword light was exactly the same. Li Tianlan couldn't even find the slightest difference between them. The huge blade of Xianyuan Feng seemed to be trembling slightly with excitement. This was the first magic weapon in the world, but at this time, it clearly expressed its joy and docility to Li Tianlan. This was a sword with emotions, but from beginning to end, it did not show any resistance to Li Tianlan. It was an eager closeness, as if the joy of reunion after a long separation. Docile and well-behaved. Holding the huge sword in his hand, Li Tianlan even thought that Xianyuan Feng was a part of his body. There was no doubt whose sword it was. But where did its feelings for him come from? Li Tianlan was as still as a statue. The pitch-black blade shone with a majestic luster as it pierced into DK's chest. The black sword was too wide and too big. The sword pierced through DK's body, extending from his neck all the way to his abdomen. His old body seemed to be hanging on the blade of the sword, on the verge of collapse. Li Tianlan came to his senses and looked into DK's eyes. He suppressed the countless emotions in his heart. In front of him was victory. This was the strongest opponent he had ever killed single-handedly since he entered the world. But he used a sword light like that. He didn't even know if it was his sword or Dongqing Huangtu's. I won, he said in a hoarse voice. DK looked at him. His eyes, which were still filled with the last bit of vitality, were a little dazed. His domain was on the verge of collapse, and in the end, it completely shattered. The sparkling and translucent ray of light fell from the sky. Li Tianlan extended his hand. A crystal-like radiance fell into his hand. At this moment, in the eyes of all the members of the Jiang clan, Li Tianlan stood in the air, defeated the Heaven Saber, and took the amber. DK chuckled and said with difficulty, "Do it." He understood what Li Tianlan meant, but he was powerless to stop it. Qianqiu was his last move, which burned his life and potential. At his age, it was enough to drain all his strength and break his body in an instant. This was the best result. He didn't know if Qianqiu could kill Li Tianlan. But he was doomed to die, and it was his own unique skill that killed him. Li Tianlan didn't defeat him, but he was defeated by the constant passage of time. But Li Tianlan's sword was too fast. The sword light shattered Qianqiu's blade light and penetrated his body. The sharp sword energy was as sticky as water, tightly sealing his body that was about to collapse. So he was still alive today. Li Tianlan wanted to kill him in front of all the members of the Jiang clan, destroy the belief of the Jiang clan for decades, and take away the belief of the Jiang clan for hundreds of years. After this day, everyone knew that DK had been defeated by Li Tianlan. It was not as they had planned, that DK had broken his own body. You're a good opponent. Li Tianlan's calm voice spread to every corner of the island. I will remember your blade, and remember this Qianqiu. Xian Yuanfeng suddenly pulled out of DK's chest. Li Tianlan's voice was calm and almost cold. Go well. He waved his sword and cut through the sky. Old ancestor. No. Don't. The dark blade cut through the wind. DK struggled to raise his head, looking at the long sword that ended his life, his eyes calm and peaceful. The black sword light suddenly soared, sweeping across with incomparable coldness and cruelty. Bang. The blade light all over the sky exploded for the last time. Blood gushed up to the sky. DK's head kept rising with the blood. His head was rising. His body fell directly into the Kanglan Lake below. Jiang Tongya, the patriarch of the Jiang clan, rushed into the lake like a madman and caught DK's body with trembling hands. In the other direction, Jiang Tonghui rushed up to the sky to catch DK's head. Everyone was staring at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was already covered in blood. His face was extremely pale. DK's outburst undoubtedly caused unimaginable serious injury to Li Tianlan. A faintly discernible but extremely wild and gloomy atmosphere continued to spread on the island. Several experts of the Jiang clan took a step forward subconsciously. Li Tianlan's figure slowly landed on the ground. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The quiet waves of the Kanglan Lake were extremely pleasant. A layer of misty white mist gradually gushed out from the shore of the lake. The white mist spread quietly and shrouded Li Tianlan's body. Jiang Tongya walked out of the lake step by step, holding DK's body. His eyes were red, but he was still calm. More and more elites of the Jiang clan came over. Everyone was looking at the white mist. The white mist surged lazily, spreading more and more, covering the elites of the Jiang clan, and an area of hundreds of meters. Jiang Tonghui frowned and said in a deep voice, "Everyone get out." In the sound of footsteps, the elites of the Jiang clan began to retreat, but they still surrounded Li Tianlan intentionally or unintentionally. Jiang Tongya looked at the white mist in front of him and said nothing. The white mist suddenly came and began to slowly recede. Light footsteps sounded from the mist. It was neither fast nor slow. Li Tianlan slowly walked out of the area shrouded by the mist. The wounds all over his body had almost completely healed, and a few of the deeper wounds were also recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. His face had become ready, and his aura had once again become powerful, calm, and indifferent. The corner of Jiang Tongye's mouth moved, and his heart fell to the bottom in an instant. He was sure that Li Tianlan's internal injuries had not recovered. But now the visible healing speed of the wounds was enough to show that Li Tianlan's recovery ability was abnormal. His external injuries were almost healed, but who knew how much his internal injuries had recovered? The amber sword was hidden in the nothingness. Li Tianlan looked at the countless elites of the Jiang clan surrounding him, raised his eyebrows, and chuckled. His voice was calm. Do you want to die? The dragon vein is indeed on you. In the faint voice, Summer Solstice separated the crowd. She looked at Li Tianlan with a complicated look in her eyes. Li Tianlan looked at Summer Solstice. Are you afraid? I'm scared to death. Summer Solstice chuckled. She looked at the crowd around her and whispered, You have an agreement with the old master. Now that the old master is dead and you have the amber, do you still want to kill people here? Li Tianlan was silent for a while and looked at the crowd around him. His fingers gently touched the air around him. The silent and illusory sword light suddenly lit up for a moment. An extremely sharp sword energy rose into the air and flew directly to the center of the island. The delicate small sword kept growing in the air and finally landed in front of the flagpole in the center of the island. That was the void sword of the 13th floor. Without sword energy lingering around, the quiet sword of the void was like a faintly discernible shadow. The void suppressing the Kanglin. Li Tianlan looked at the direction where the sword energy fell. His eyes stopped on Jiang Tongye and Jiang Tonghui for a moment, and he said calmly, I will give the Jiang clan a chance to join Emperor Dong's palace, but not today. Before Wang Tianzong reappears, you should think it through, tell the void, and then take it to Tiannan to find me. No one from the Jiang clan spoke. Everyone was looking at Li Tianlan quietly. Summer Solstice narrowed her eyes slightly and sneered. Your Highness, you are so bold. But you don't seem to have thought about what will happen when Tianzong comes back. I will wait for him, Li Tianlan said calmly. When he reappears, I will come to Beihai again and get my sword back. In the uproar, Li Tianlan's voice was extremely clear. This was different from the beer. This was his declaration in front of the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai. When the Sword Emperor reappeared, he would come to Beihai again and get his sword back. He would come to Beihai again and fight with the Sword Emperor. A sharp light suddenly flashed in Summer Solstice's eyes. She didn't know how long it would take for Wang Tianzong to recover from his injury. But from Li Tianlan's voice, she heard unquestionable confidence. This was a kind of momentum, the invincible momentum that belonged to Li Tianlan. Summer Solstice slowly turned around and looked at the north of Beihai province across the Kanglin River. If they went further north, they would get closer to Mount Dibbing with every step. She was silent for a long time and then said calmly, We can talk. We've talked about everything that needs to be talked about. Li Tianlan said blandly. Hand over all the devil troop and publicly apologize to the Snowdance Corps and the Dongqing clan. Summer Solstice looked at Li Tianlan. Is there no other way? No. Li Tianlan answered without hesitation. This was the bottom line. There was no other way. Summer Solstice was silent for a while. After returning to Mount Dibbing, Wang Yuetong didn't cry or make a fuss, but she didn't say much to him. She just shook her head at Summer Solstice, and then locked herself in the room without seeing anyone. Now she knew Li Tianlan's request. This was a request that the Wang family of Beihai couldn't agree to. Summer Solstice slowly turned around and walked to the boat on the shore. She said coldly, I'll wait for you at Mount Dibbing. Li Tianlan didn't respond and he didn't need to respond. Huangfu Qiushui looked at Li Tianlan and bit her lip. No one knew what she was thinking in her heart. But with Summer Solstice's departure, she could only leave. Huangfu Qiushui held her small hand, turned around hesitantly, and walked to Summer Solstice. Li Tianlan didn't move or speak. Huangfu Qiushui moved little by little to Summer Solstice. Countless complex emotions were intertwined in her heart. She turned her head subconsciously and looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was still standing there. Across the Kanglan River, he looked at the far north. He was extremely lonely. Some people say that Tianlan is the reincarnation of Huangtu. This is impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. I had gastroenteritis and had diarrhea all day. I was in a trance when writing this chapter. Chapter 649. The boat docked at the northern shore of the Tsanglan River. When summer solstice led Huangfu Qiushui to the shore, the mighty line of motorcade had been waiting quietly in the wind and rain for a long time. Xiaji didn't say anything more. She walked softly into the Rolls-Royce in the middle of the motorcade. She leaned against the soft back of the chair and was silent for a long time before she said softly, "Drive." The convoy slowly moved forward. The moment they left the Kanglan River, Huangfu Qiushui, who had been silent the entire way, quietly turned her head and looked at the small island in the middle of the river. The island became a little blurry in the wind and rain. The people who stood by the shore and looked to the north were even more blurry. Farther and farther away, the beautiful girl who had been trying her best to remain calm suddenly felt empty in her heart. An obvious and unfamiliar emotion attacked her will. She finally couldn't help but pucker up her small mouth and was about to cry. Farther and farther away from him. He was getting further and further away from her eyes. She didn't know if it was because she couldn't bear to part with him or the sword, but she just couldn't bear to part with him. Autumn water has grown up. Xiaji gently touched Huangfu Qiushui's head and smiled. "You have a sweetheart, and you blame me for pulling you away?" "No." Huangfu Qiushui shook her head in panic. "Not my sweetheart. My sword. I'll get it back one day." Summer Solstice said softly, "We are in the general trend, and no one can sing all the way. The Wang family of Beihai hasn't encountered setbacks for so many years that everyone thinks it's abnormal for us to have setbacks. In fact, it's the most abnormal to have such an idea. Li Tianlan is indeed shining brightly now, but everyone will have a low point. You will get your limelight back." Huangfu Qiushui bit her lip and did not speak. Lights kept flashing in her mind, one after another. They were all magnificent sword lights. They were Li Tianlan's sword lights. She likes swords. I like autumn water. She didn't know Li Tianlan, but she was infatuated with his sword light. Right now, the convoy headed north, getting further and further away from him. His footsteps might also go all the way to the north, and she would see him on Mount Dibbing. But in the end, the short time they spent together was gone forever. Huangfu Qiushui thought in a daze. She reached out her hand and subconsciously touched her face. Her face was soft, fair, clean, and exquisite like warm jade. Somehow, she thought of the time when Li Tianlan's feet rubbed against her face. Huangfu Qiushui's body trembled slightly. Her face was rosy, and she looked even more charming and beautiful. Summer Solstice quietly looked at Huangfu Qiushui's gradually misty eyes and sighed softly. Whether it was the person who liked Li Tianlan or his sword, it was all Li Tianlan. Huangfu Qiushui might not understand this feeling now, but as someone who had been through it, how could Xiaji not understand Huangfu Qiushui's thoughts? She actually didn't mind that Huangfu Qiushui's heart belonged to someone else. He did not mind that his daughter Wang Yuetong was deeply in love with Li Tianlan. In the boundless secular world, there were too many complicated feelings that needed to be entangled for a lifetime. For example, back then the old patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai had almost destroyed her entire family. Her father had been transformed into a demon army. From Summer Solstice's personal standpoint, she naturally had reasons to hate Beihai. But from the standpoint of the hostess of the Wang family of Beihai, it was hard for her to say that what the Wang family of Beihai did back then was wrong. She hated Wang Tianzong's father, but she married Wang Tianzong willingly. Most of the time, Summer Solstice was glad. Glad that she could still see clearly with hatred, and chose the man she loved the most and loved her the most. So she never blamed Wang Yuetong, nor did she blame the current Huangfu Qiushui. She was just a little worried that their choices were wrong. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. But Li Tianlan, Summer Solstice thought of everything today and smiled slightly bitterly. The man who killed the Heaven Saber at the age of 22. This could no longer be described as brilliant. This was truly unparalleled. Wang Yuedong, Huang Fuqiushui, Dongqing Rushi, even Qin Weibai. So what if they were more ambitious than the sky? In the face of the current Li Tianlan, it was normal for young and proud women to be tempted. On the contrary, it was the most abnormal for them not to be tempted. She reached out and patted Huang Fuqiushui's head gently. Sleep for a while. Huang Fuqiushui shook her head and did not speak. Summer Solstice did not say much either. She leaned against the car and closed her eyes to rest, but a smile gradually appeared on the corner of her mouth. She was sorry that Heaven Saber DK died in battle. But that was his own choice. After all, she did not come to Kanglan City empty-handed this time. Because she saw the 13th floor. It was not the flawless, powerful, invincible, and eternal sword light in Eastern Europe. It was the sword of the Chosen One, which had just taken shape, but had too much to make up for. The gorgeous but still somewhat immature invincible sword light kept replaying in her mind. She still didn't know who Dongqing Huangtu was. But she had a vague way to help Wang Tianzong. When Beihai was in turmoil, the general trend of Eastern Europe had fallen to the last trace of aftermath. The negotiation, which was neither long nor short, finally ended. In the face of the coercion and temptation of countless countries, Snow Country, which had shown a tough attitude from the beginning, did not change its initial position in the end. The Border Control Corps was still stationed in Snow Country. But in the chaos, Snow Country still refused the olive branch of Zhongzhou State under great pressure. They chose the Wang family of Beihai. An hour before Jiang Shangyu, the vice marshal of the Snowdance Corps in Wulan State, got the news. The Prime Minister of Snow Country had officially signed an agreement with Wang Shengxiao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. The signing place of the agreement was in Fanio City. Most of the contents of this Flying Bird agreement were confidential, but just a few leaked contents were enough to make people sigh with emotion. In the cold and gloomy temperature of Wulan State, Jiang Shangyu put down the document in his hand, shook his head, and said with a chuckle, "Beihai has made a lot of money this time." What did His Majesty say? In the empty office, the voice of Luxing Sangqiuan, the master of Jifeng Sword Raining School in East Island, came from the phone in front of Jiang Shangyu. Jifeng Sword Raining School had suffered heavy losses in Eastern Europe, and nearly half of its elites had died in Mormons. But at the last moment, Jiang Shangyu kept Luxing Sangqiuan, which could be regarded as saving his life. Now, although Luxing Sangqiuan was still injured, he could be said to be one of the few invincible realm experts in the entire dark world who could maintain their peak state. There is no explanation, Jiang Shangyu said blandly. At this point, as long as Snow Country is not stupid, it must be determined to cooperate with the Wang family of Beihai. At present, although the requirements of the Wang family of Beihai are extremely harsh, Snow Country can agree, which certainly means that the compensation given by the Wang family of Beihai is not small. Both sides can barely be regarded as a win-win situation. At least during this period, the relationship between Beihai and Snow Country will not be destroyed. One less Wang Tianzong and one Snow Country. Luxing Sangqiuan pondered for a moment. To be exact, it's not less, but it's less for the time being. Jiang Shangyu said calmly. The teacher has evaluated that sword light. That sword light is really strong, but Wang Tianzong will be seriously injured at most. He will not die. At most, he will take a longer time to recuperate. For a person like him, as long as he is not dead, few people dare to really fight with the Wang family of Beihai. Exchanging Snow Country with serious injuries, the gains of the Wang family of Beihai in Eastern Europe are simply unimaginable. This chapter is not over. Please turn the page. No matter how big their gains are, they may not have time to digest it. Luxing Sangqiuan suddenly laughed in a low voice. It's true that few people dare to fight against the Wang family of Beihai, but it doesn't mean that there is no one. Li Tianlan has defeated Autumn Water and Heaven Reaching. If the intelligence is correct, he should have arrived at Kanglan now. This time, the Wang family of Beihai really lost face, and this will even be the beginning of their decline. Jiang Shangyu was silent for a while and finally opened a video. The video was divided into two parts. The first part was extremely blurred. It was the scene of Li Tianlan on the Lingtai mountain. But because the distance was too far, only some blurred sword light could be seen in the video. However, the second part was much clearer. It was not because of the close distance. It was because the sword light in the second video was too dazzling, and Li Tianlan's voice also shook heaven and earth. A sword cut a mountain. Jiang Shangyu watched the two videos for a long time. Now Li Tianlan, he sighed softly and whispered, he is really strong. How is he compared with you? Luxing Sangchuan suddenly asked. Jiang Shangyu was quiet for a moment, as if he was thinking about whether Luxing Sangchuan was trustworthy or measuring his own strength. After a long time, he slowly said, if he doesn't have Xianyuan Feng with him, I should not be afraid of him. I can't beat him, but I can't lose either. Luxing Sangchuan didn't speak for a long time. He seemed to be in absolute shock. Jiang Shangyu was never arrogant. He wouldn't talk big. The two videos were enough to measure Li Tianlan's current strength. It was the power that even an invincible realm expert had to be afraid of. But Jiang Shangyu said that he could compete with Li Tianlan without the sword formation. What did that mean? Luxing Sangchuan's voice trembled slightly. Then can we start our plan? He was still in his peak state, and there was Jiang Shangyu. Their plan had begun to mature. Wait a little longer. Jiang Shangyu's tone was calm. Wait for what? Luxing Sangchuan's tone was a little aggressive, but more than that he couldn't wait. When he becomes strong, we won't have a chance. We don't have to wait so long. Jiang Shangyu laughed. I'm waiting for him to break through Beihai province. He paused and continued. If he can really break through, only in this way can we accurately measure Li Tianlan's current strength. Luxing Sangchuan didn't speak for a long time. Jiang Shangyu wanted to comfort him, but Luxing Sangchuan suddenly said, let me show you a video. The Battle of Kanglan Island has come to an end. He paused and said with great difficulty, DK has died. Jiang Shangyu's body suddenly shook, and he accepted the video immediately. This video was too short, but it was incomparably gorgeous. The saber light all over the sky. The eternal sword. It was just a few seconds, but it had explained everything. Jiang Shangyu's body stiffened in place. He looked at the video and was silent for a long time. How is it? Luxing Sangchuan asked in a low voice. Jiang Shangyu didn't speak. He sat in the chair, and his eyes were a little lost. The eternal sword. The 13th floor, he laughed at himself. From the first time he saw this sword light, he had been sure that this era was destined to be ruled by this sword light. It would rule for a long time. He took a deep breath and said calmly, the plan should be adjusted. End of this chapter. Bookmark for easy reading. Chapter 650. The thick documents were divided into dozens of copies and placed on the huge and luxurious desk, like a hill. From Beihai to Snow Country, Wang Shengxiao, who had become thinner in a short time, was almost drowned by the pile of documents. 2 hours ago, the Flying Bird Agreement was officially signed in Fanio City, less than 200 miles away from Snow Country. It also meant that the catastrophe that swept the entire Dark World had officially ended. The Li family and the Wang family of Beihai had become the biggest winners in this chaos. The Li family would completely control the 5 countries in Eastern Europe, and the Wang family of Beihai would completely control Snow Country from today on. The dozens of documents in front of him covered the military, politics, wealthy families, and major industries. Almost everything in Snow Country was in the Flying Bird Agreement. Although Snow Country and the Wang family of Beihai were determined to cooperate, the negotiation was extremely difficult from the beginning. Wang Shengxiao appeared on such an important occasion for the first time. He told himself countless times that every condition in this negotiation was related to the future of the Wang family of Beihai. Therefore, Snow Country and the Wang family of Beihai had been haggling over every bit of interest at the negotiating table in recent days. After giving countless substantial promises, the Wang family of Beihai finally got the Flying Bird Agreement and Snow Country. This country could accommodate the Violet family and the Morton family. In 20 years at most, as long as the Wang family of Beihai did not make any mistakes in decision-making, their strength in all aspects would increase exponentially after absorbing the interests of Snow Country. Wang Shengxiao looked through the documents of the Flying Bird Agreement one by one. The sun outside the window rose to the sky and gradually fell. The sun was setting. Dusk was approaching. In the gradually dimming room, Wang Shengxiao put down the last document in his hand, leaned against the chair behind him, and closed his eyes. Exhaustion came over him like a tide. His breathing gradually became even, and he seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep. The door of the room was pushed open. Wang Xiaoyao, who had been in Eastern Europe for a few days, walked in with a food box in his hand. Wang Shengxiao, who seemed to be asleep, opened his eyes and looked at Wang Xiaoyao quietly. "Why don't you go to eat?" Wang Xiaoyao put the food box on the table, glanced at the documents piled up on the table, and chuckled. "Don't worry, there won't be any problems. You are too cautious. Some mistakes can't be made even once." Wang Shengxiao looked at the dark sky outside the window and said softly. Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while, and patted the food box. "Eat it while it's hot. It's all your favorite food." They were now in Fanio City. It would also become the headquarters of the Wang family of Beihai in Snow Country in the future. Fanio City was not a big city in Snow Country, nor was it rich in resources, but it was the real hinterland of Snow Country. Less than 200 miles away from Fanio City was the dock that Snow Country had allocated to the Wang family of Beihai. The dock would last for 200 years, and the Beihai Corps could station more than 30,000 elite Navy soldiers at the dock. After leaving the pier and heading south, they arrived at the North Sea province. The bird flew all the way to the west. It was a perfectly straight road. The capital of the Snow Country was less than 200 miles away. Snow Country was really sincere. It was equivalent to handing over its lifeline to the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Shengxiao's mind was full of the contents of the Fanio Agreement, and the Wang family of Beihai's plan to expand the Beihai Corps. Mount Dibing established the Beihai Corps by itself, which nominally belonged to Zhongzhou State. If it wanted to expand, it naturally had to report to the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State. It was self-evident what attitude Dongqing Wudi, who had gradually stabilized his position in the army headquarters, would have on this matter. It was destined to be another fierce struggle. But now, when his father had not recovered from his injury, the people of the Southeast Group were uncertain. In addition, Wang Jinglei's attitude was ambiguous. Their overall combat capability might not be much stronger than that of the giant group that had gradually united. He rubbed his forehead with a headache and said with a wry smile, "I can't eat. I have no appetite." "What? Are you afraid that I'll poison you?" Wang Xiaoyao joked. His smile was charming. Wang Shengxiao was stunned and couldn't help laughing. He reached out and opened the food box. Looking at the carefully prepared side dishes and light porridge, he nodded and said, "Thank you." Wang Xiaoyao waved his hand, casually sorted out the materials on the table, and sat down opposite Wang Shengxiao. "We will set up a new corps in Snow Country. It will be regarded as a branch of the Beihai Corps, but it will be renamed. Who do you have in mind for the commander of the corps?" "Uncle Wang of the Shadow Sting Army can do it." Wang Shengxiao thought for a while eating and said, "And we can ask him to bring a group of elites from the Shadow Sting Army." The Shadow Sting Army was the largest special forces in Zhongzhou State. Commander Wang Zhaoyang could also be said to be the top expert in Zhongzhou State. The Wang family of Beihai establishing a new corps in Snow Country was naturally an important force to deter or ensure the happy cooperation between Snow Country and the Wang family of Beihai. It could even be said to be the core force. It was no exaggeration to say that if the Wang family of Beihai really split in the future, whoever could control this new corps could get everything of the Wang family of Beihai in Snow Country. Wang Zhaoyang was very good to Wang Shengxiao, and was also deeply trusted by Wang Tianzong. He was the first candidate that came to Wang Shengxiao's mind. Wen Cheng is also good. Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while and looked at Wang Shengxiao. His eyes were calm. He will not be worse than Zhao Yang. And the position of the Shadow Sting Army is very delicate. It's better not to move. Zhao Yang can control the situation there. Wang Shengxiao raised his head and looked at Wang Xiaorao. His eyes were very warm, but there were other emotions behind the warmth. He smiled slightly and said with some mockery, "Second uncle, you can't wait?" Wang Wencheng was a high-level member of the Beihai Corps. It could be said that he was Wang Tianzong's man. But such a division only meant that he was not close to Wang Qinglei. In fact, this high-level member of the Beihai Corps was Wang Xiaoyao's real confidant. Wang Xiaoyao entered the invincible realm, but he was transferred away from Mount Dibing when the enemy was in front of him. Many people in the Beihai Corps sensed something unusual. In just a few days, Wang Wencheng's situation had become difficult. Wang Xiaoyao wanted to control Snow Country, so he naturally wanted his confidant to come here and take charge. I entered the invincible realm. With a smile, Wang Xiaoyao said something that seemed irrelevant. Wang Shengxiao looked down at the porridge in front of him. His eyes were a little dazed. After a long silence, he slowly opened his mouth and said calmly, "It's all up to you, second uncle." "Then Wencheng?" Wang Xiaoyao said with a smile. Wang Shengxiao nodded. "Who do you have in mind for the deputy commander and deputy commander of the corps?" Wang Xiaoyao asked. Wang Shengxiao drank the porridge and said in a lukewarm tone, "Second uncle, just look for someone." Wang Xiaoyao nodded without hesitation and said with a smile, "Okay." The porridge was finished. Wang Shengxiao took a bite of the side dish and picked up the document again. It was clear that he wanted to see the guest off. Wang Xiaoyao didn't leave. He took out his mobile phone from his pocket and put it in front of Wang Shengxiao. He whispered, "The news has been sent to me at noon, but I haven't given it to you. Old Master DK has died. Li Tianlan has now surpassed Kanglan realm. This is the video before the old master died." Wang Shengxiao's body suddenly shook, and the magnitude was extremely obvious. Wang Xiaoyao pushed the mobile phone over. Wang Shengxiao looked at the mobile phone quietly. The strongest enemy in his life on the mobile phone had traveled half of Beihai. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, he would arrive at Mount Dibing. He looked at the mobile phone quietly, and was silent for a long time. Wang Xiaoyao looked at him quietly without any expression. After a long time, Wang Shengxiao reached out his hand and pressed the mobile phone. Countless sword intents bloomed in his hand. The whole mobile phone was twisted and shattered in his hand, turning into a piece of debris. Wang Xiaorao raised his eyebrows slightly. "I won't go back," Wang Shengxiao said in a low voice. "So, it's better not to watch it." Wang Shengxiao still didn't speak. He seemed to be explaining or convincing himself. Wang Shengxiao clenched his hands into fists. "I can't go back. I have to stay here." Wang Xiaoyao's eyes were a little complicated. Father is seriously injured. Now it's different from before. Many people say that this is a new era in the dark world. They say that after Mormon's sword, the new era has begun. I'm the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. I can't afford to lose. I really can't afford to lose. So, I can't go back. Even if Heaven's Saber dies, even Brother Jiang will fail. Li Tianlan will sweep Mount Dibing. I can't go back. Wang Shengxiao's voice seemed to be gritting his teeth. "If I don't go back, I won't fail." He sat in the chair and seemed to be unable to breathe. His body was extremely stiff. Wang Shengxiao looked at him quietly for a long time before sighing softly. He walked around the desk, reached out, and patted Wang Shengxiao on the shoulder. "Yuetong has gone back," Wang Xiaorao said softly. "She has been with Li Tianlan, but now she has returned to Mount Dibing. I don't want to say anything. I just want to say that Yuetong's return to Mount Dibing and your silence in Eastern Europe today are the greatest courage." Wang Shengxiao trembled and took a deep breath. He reached out and held Wang Xiaoyao's palm tightly. "Second uncle." His voice trembled and he was a little confused. "Am I useless? How could it be?" Wang Xiaorao laughed and touched his nephew's head. "I watched that video. I don't think it makes sense for you to go back. So it's best for you to stay here. At least, if you're not in Mount Dibing, the Wang family of Beihai won't fail completely. You can't do anything now. The only thing you can do is to be silent." He whispered. "What about you?" Wang Shengxiao looked up at Wang Xiaoyao's eyes. "You are a new invincible realm expert. What if you go back?" This question, Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while and whispered, This question itself is meaningless. Your mother doesn't agree with me in Mount Dibbing, and neither does my elder brother. I don't agree with your approach, either. Wang Shengxiao looked into Wang Xiaoyao's eyes with pleading eyes. What you want, what Beihai wants, we can do it with our own ability. In the hundreds of years of history of Beihai, when has there ever been such a despicable practice? Wang Xiaoyao looked at Wang Shengxiao and said seriously, how is it despicable? It's all reasonable. Everything I've done is my ability. Wang Shengxiao held Wang Xiaoyao's palm and said nothing. You're still too young. Wang Xiaoyao looked at Wang Shengxiao and pulled his palm out of Wang Shengxiao's hand little by little. Young people are too naive. Wang Shengxiao's hand, which was a little red, patted him on the shoulder. Don't think too much. Pay attention to rest. He packed up the food box and walked out of the door. Second uncle. Wang Shengxiao shouted behind him. Wang Xiaoyao's figure stopped in place. After a long time he chuckled. It's okay. He walked out of the door. The door was closed. The dark night shrouded the room, extremely deep. Wang Shengxiao sat in the chair like a statue. The computer on the desk suddenly lit up. A strange video was transmitted. The light shone on Wang Shengxiao's face looking faint. Wang Shengxiao frowned and connected the video. At the other end of the video, Jiang Shangyu's face appeared on the screen with a bright face. Did you see that sword light? He asked directly before Wang Shengxiao could speak. Before Wang Shengxiao could answer, he continued to say with a smile, I can survive that sword strike. Can you? Chapter 651. When the meeting of the World Palace was forcibly ended in a hubbub, Dijiang, who only spoke a few times in the whole meeting, but almost all of them were orders, slowly stood up and walked out of the World Palace in a suppressed doubt and anger. His order was too inconceivable. It was opposed by several sword-holding families on the spot. But an order was an order. Dijiang didn't give in at all. When Wang Tianzong didn't come out, everything on Mount Dibbing and the Wang family of Beihai was under his full control. When the real order came down, no one could disobey it, and no one dared to resist now. The first heavy rain in late summer and early autumn spread from the autumn water to Shengzhou. The sky was gloomy, and the air was cool. Dijiang stood in front of the door of the World Palace, watching the crazy autumn rain knocking on the quaint cornices, and remained silent for a long time. Firmament, an expert of the half-step invincible realm from the Wang family of Beihai, stood outside the World Palace in person. Seeing Dijiang come out, he gently closed the door in the face of countless ambiguous gazes in the World Palace. That's it. Dijiang murmured to himself. Are you sure you want to do this? Firmament frowned and asked. This is the best choice. Dijiang's figure walked into the wind and rain. His figure was extremely straight in the rain, very firm, but with a kind of exhaustion that could not bear the burden. Firmament stared at his back for a very long time. Dijiang kept walking along the path. The wind and rain drenched him, and his clothes were wet in an instant. He passed by a flower bed and a delicate lake. A narrow and straight flagstone path appeared in front of him. This was a starting point. Mount Dibbing was full of colorful flowers. But looking from this flagstone road, it was all gray everywhere. It was an indescribable color that contained countless emotions, with endless desolation, extending to the highest point of Mount Dibbing. There were no flowers or green grass here. Only countless rocks piled up to form the hardest road. Silent, solemn, and solemn. Almost sacred. Dijiang walked up along the path. At the end of the path were steps. The steps were very high, and every step needed to be steady. Dijiang looked calm. He slowly walked up, walking in the purest color of Mount Dibbing. Under the violent wind and rain, his silent figure seemed to have completely merged with the gray and white. At the end of the steps was a small space. In the center of the platform, which was nearly 200 square meters, stood a huge boulder that had been eroded by time and wind and rain for hundreds of years. The densely packed names spread down the huge boulder, bringing with them an indescribable solemnity and solemnity. This was the least ornamental place in the entire Mount Dibbing. This was the most sacred place in the entire Mount Dibbing. It was also the highest place in the entire Mount Dibbing. Stage of formidable person. Stone of formidable ambition. Dijiang looked at the stone that had stood there for hundreds of years and the name on it. There were a lot of names on the list, but every name could be found in the history of the Wang family of Beihai. The sacrifice, the good fighters, the missing, everyone, no matter the outcome. Their names were carved on the stone, indicating their contributions to the Wang family of Beihai. Dijiang found his ancestors on it. The people with the surname Jiang were lined up neatly. Right above the Jiang family was a name that still shone on the genealogy of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Fuyu, the younger brother of the chosen one. He was also the patriarch of the Jiang family. Dijiang smiled. He stared deeply at every name, and his laughter was obviously trembling. At this moment, his eyes were crazy and solemn, with unparalleled persistence and passion. It was as if an endless pressure was pressing down on his body, and then he lifted it up with an incomparably great strength. "I'm sorry," he said softly, looking at the ancestors of the Jiang family, and said softly, "I'm sorry." He said sorry countless times, but only the wind and rain responded to him. A light footstep sounded on the steps. The footsteps were intermittent, lingering in Dijiang's consciousness. They came and went, but they were getting closer and closer to him. Dijiang turned his head vigilantly, and then froze on the spot. In his sight, a white dress almost floated to the stage of formidable person. The white dress evaporated the falling wind and rain with high temperature. Her delicate short hair was clean and tidy. Her face was still beautiful but extremely pale and numb. Her steps were soft and drifting, and she walked slowly to the stage of formidable person, like a ghost without any vitality. Dijiang looked at her quietly, with mixed feelings. Wang Yuetong didn't speak. She stood in front of the stone of formidable person, and looked at the names one by one. After a long time, she said softly, "Brother Jiang, you imprisoned the patriarchs of the 7 sword-holding families?" "Yes," Dijiang said softly. He had a clear conscience, so he didn't need to explain anything. Wang Yuetong looked down quietly. This was the highest place of Mount Dibing, so she could see the whole view of Mount Dibing. Through the woods and the sea of flowers, Mount Dibing was moving. The square, every path, the top of the mountainside, the foot of the mountain, everywhere was moving. Countless people were walking down. Even the tens of thousands of elites of the Beihai Corps stationed at the foot of the mountain were moving. And the internal security troops guarding Mount Dibing were also moving. Wang Yuetong looked at all this quietly and asked, "Why?" "The Beihai Corps has 2 large-scale maneuvers in Kanglan and Floating Island. Now it's time for them to set off." As for the internal security forces, they've been living too comfortably these years. Although they've maintained their usual training, having sufficient combat effectiveness doesn't mean having advanced combat awareness. So I sent them to Kanglan to participate in this maneuver together. Dijiang's voice was calm without any ups and downs. Wang Yuetong looked at everything in sight. A sniper battalion that originally belonged to the internal security troops on the mountainside also started to move down the mountain. And at the place closest to the top of the mountain, one squad after another began to leave Mount Dibing. Wang Yuetong's heart was empty. Are the Heaven Punishment Troop also leaving? All of them. Dijiang said softly. They are needed for the maneuver. What about here? Wang Yuetong asked. He is coming. Is there any force here that can stop him? And me, Dijiang said. I will try my best to stop him in front of the stage of formidable person. What if you can't beat him? Wang Yuetong looked at Dijiang's eyes. The old master has fallen. If you fail, that's also my failure. Dijiang's voice was calm and a little cruel. It's my own failure. It's not the failure of Mount Dibing. All the forces on Mount Dibing have been drawn out. In an empty state, when he comes to Mount Dibing, he can only defeat me. He can't defeat Mount Dibing. Even if he gets on the stage of formidable person, he is just a villain who takes advantage of the situation. This is my mistake. It has nothing to do with Mount Dibing or the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Yuetong stood there and looked at Dijiang, lost in thought. She finally understood Dijiang's plan. He imprisoned the patriarchs of the 7 major sword-holding families to prevent them from intervening in this battle. He transferred all the forces on Mount Dibing, leaving Mount Dibing in an empty state. He stayed here alone, waiting for Li Tianlan. He would do his best to protect everything of the Wang family of Beihai, but he was also ready to bear all the humiliation and failure. Even here, it was only Dijiang who failed. Dijiang's surname was not Wang. Even if he failed, even if he was humiliated, it was Dijiang who suffered all this. Maybe some people would question that transferring the Heaven Punishment Troop and the Internal Security Troop away was cowardly for retreating without fighting. But it was also Dijiang who made this decision. Facing Li Tianlan, who was about to come to Mount Dibing, Dijiang was ready for both sides. If he won, everyone would be happy. If he lost, he would bear all the infamy, all the humiliation, and all the failure alone. Wang Yuetong's eyes were a little dazed. Why did he do that? She murmured. For Beihai. Dijiang's voice was still calm and composed. He turned to look at the names of the ancestors of the Jiang family, and there was finally a trace of sadness in his eyes. The ancestors of our Jiang family. He pointed to the name at the top, which was second only to Wang Fuyu. When the Jiang family was founded, it happened to face the strongest counterattack of East Island. They wanted to take back half of the land that now belonged to Beihai. Experts came and went. My ancestor blocked Qiushui with less than 30 elites of the Jiang family. They fought fiercely for a day and a night, killed nearly 600 experts of East Island, and died of exhaustion. My grandfather. 30 years ago, when I was young, I went deep into Star State alone and rescued nearly 300 elites of the Wang family of Beihai who were besieged in Star State. From Federal City to the seaside, it was more than 400 kilometers. He contained more than half of the men in black in Star State, and killed 15 experts at the peak of the Thundershocking realm in Star State alone. When his body was sent back, it could hardly be found intact. He took a deep breath and stared at the names of the Jiang family with great affection. The names carved on the stone of formidable person have countless identities, but there is only one identity that belongs to the Jiang family. They are all sacrifices. And I, he laughed, thinking about everything that might happen, the humiliation he would bear, the infamy he would suffer, and the failure he would face. If I am lucky in the future, when my name is carved on the stone of formidable person, I should be the only coward in the Jiang family, and the only one on the stone of formidable person. Have you ever thought about what will happen after you do this? Wang Yuetong looked at him. Your own future, the future of the Wang family of Beihai. I haven't thought about my future. Dijiang said calmly, but the future of the Wang family of Beihai. If I fail, I will be opposed by many sword-holding families, and even discussed and disdained by countless people of Beihai. I don't deserve to sit in this position. He whispered, so the future of the Wang family of Beihai has to wait for Shengxiao to come back. Wang Yuetong's body shook slightly. If Dijiang failed, he preserved the power of Mount Dibing, but he bore endless infamy. At that time, Wang Shengxiao would come back from Eastern Europe, and he could naturally sit in his position and take charge of everything of the Wang family of Beihai as the heir. Justifiably. Did you plan this? Wang Yuetong looked at him and asked. Dijiang didn't answer the question but said blandly, this is my own choice. He looked at the names on the stone of formidable person and whispered, I'm sorry to them, but I won't regret it. Chapter 652. The afterglow of the setting sun shone quietly on the vast sea. The calm sea glowed with golden light. Under the burning sky, more and more people appeared on the ground. Countless behemoths floated in Beihai. The roar in the sky kept ringing. The crowd rushed on the ground, occupying all the places in the mountains, woods, and lawns like torrents, with the power to sweep everything away. The roars and roars that were loud enough to shake the world rushed into the sea and into the sky, with endless anger, like a force that could tear the world apart. Dongqing Wudi watched all this quietly. His eyes were calm, but his face was full of a satisfied smile. The morale is high. He turned around and patted the shoulder of a lieutenant general beside him, saying with a smile, very good. What I hope to see next is a real fierce battle. His palm gradually tightened, and his voice was steady. Beihai Corps, very good. You didn't let me down. Minister, you flatter us. Beside Dongqing Wudi, Lieutenant General of Zhongzhou State, deputy commander of Beihai Corps, chief of staff Wang Wenjiang, said with a straight face, Beihai Corps will not let anyone down. This is an army that dares to fight hard battles. They guard Beihai and are not afraid of any challenge. Dongqing Wudi nodded and said lightly, very good. Has the army I want to see come? Wang Wenjiang narrowed his eyes and looked at Dongqing Wudi. His eyes were extremely cold, but at this time there was a hint of mockery in them. Minister, rest assured. The Xinwu army of Shengzhou has set off as soon as it received the order. Now it has left Xingzhou and is very close to the floating island. Dongqing Wudi turned to look at him and said flatly, Wenjiang seems to be very dissatisfied with my arrangement? His eyes were calm, but they shrouded Wang Wenjiang with unparalleled pressure. Wang Wenjiang subconsciously tilted his head. If Dongqing Wudi, who had stayed in the army headquarters for a few years, had no edge, then in Snow Country Dongqing Wudi, who had advanced thousands of miles in one day and was invincible, had told the world that the god of massacre was still the god of massacre. Although his personal force was not invincible, in the charge and battle of thousands of troops, he was still the top general in the world, and the most terrible commander. Wang Wenjiang avoided Dongqing Wudi's eyes, but the humiliation in his heart grew stronger. Dongqing Wudi arrived at Floating Island City a day ago. The order of the army headquarters directly suppressed the entire Beihai Corps. Dongqing Wudi personally ordered the Beihai Corps to defend the station to the death. Any large-scale transfer beyond the company level must be reported to the army headquarters of Zhengzhou State. At the same time, Dongqing Wudi personally named several of the most combat-capable troops of the Beihai Corps to the floating island in Kanglin, saying that they were going to conduct a large-scale maneuver. The order came very abruptly, but military orders had to be obeyed. If the North Sea Legion didn't move, it would be tantamount to treason. The army named by Dongqing Wudi began to assemble. This included the Shengzhou Divine Martial Army. Everyone in North Sea knew what the Xinwu army meant. They were the troops stationed at the foot of Mount Dibing to protect it. When Li Tianlan swept across the entire Beihai province, the Beihai Corps was restless. Several bad-tempered generals had planned to lead the army to fight Li Tianlan to the death in Xingzhou. Now that the order was issued, Dongqing Wudi came to Beihai in person, which meant that he alone suppressed more than 200,000 troops of the Beihai Corps. All the elites of the Wang family of Beihai who planned to fight to the death with Li Tianlan could only grit their teeth and bear it. They were loyal enough to Beihai to not care about their duties and lives. But the order from the army headquarters of Zhengzhou State came down. If they didn't obey, they would be tantamount to treason. No one wanted to see that bring trouble to the Wang family of Beihai, which was now in turmoil. Beihai province was dominated by Mount Dibing. Under such circumstances, Sword Emperor, the only one who could object to Dongqing Wudi's order, was nowhere to be found. Everyone put their hopes on Dijiang, the acting patriarch. But Dijiang didn't resist at all. He accepted Dongqing Wudi's order. More than that, he even transferred the internal security forces of Mount Dibing and the Heaven Punishment Troop to the Floating Island and Kanglin Group. Not everyone is a wise man. At this moment, countless people were gnashing their teeth at Dijiang, who had made Mount Dibing empty. Countless people cursed him as a coward, a traitor, and a dog of Dongqing Wudi. And those who could see the situation clearly could only remain silent at this time. Wang Wenjiang could see Dijiang's painstaking efforts, but he couldn't say anything more. Now he could only report to Dongqing Wudi truthfully. Not only the Divine Martial Army, but also the internal security forces of Mount Dibing and the Heaven Punishment Troop are already on the way. We will fully cooperate with the minister's maneuver plan. Dongqing Wudi froze in place. Shortly after he arrived here, Bai Qingzhao, the Deputy Secretary General of the Army Headquarters who also rushed over from Yuzhou, also froze in place. After a long time, Dongqing Wudi blinked again and said in an indifferent voice, I see. Wang Wenjiang clenched his fist hard and said expressionlessly, Minister, if there's nothing else, I'll go down and arrange it. Dongqing Wudi waved his hand casually. Wang Wenjiang turned and left directly. Dongqing Wudi held the railing in front of him with both hands, and looked at the endless army below and the vast ocean in front of him. He was silent for a long time. Ha! Dijiang, When the sky was completely dark, he finally opened his mouth and shook his head with a smile. He's asking to be humiliated. There was obvious emotion in Bai Qingzhao's voice. He paused and said with a smile, "It's not a derogatory word. I admire him for what he did." He really admired his courage to ask to be humiliated, and appreciated his rationality in the face of difficulties. He's very decisive. He should have made a choice by now. Dongqing Wudi said softly, "This is Beihai." Bai Qingzhao was silent. Indeed, this was Beihai. This was the Wang family of Beihai. When Sword Emperor was silent and unstable, there was Wang Yuetong, who gave up everything and returned to Beihai. There was Wang Shengxiao, who was silent and forbearing in Eastern Europe. There was also Dijiang, who was willing to bear all the infamy for the Wang family of Beihai, but wanted to protect the last bit of dignity of the Wang family. Such a Beihai might lack the domineering and invincible aura of dominating the world, but it was still admirable. "I respect his choice," Dongqing Wudi said slowly. "In this case, we should move faster. We should get back what we should get back as soon as possible." "Dijiang has no backup plan?" Bai Qingzhao asked. Dongqing Wudi smiled. "How could he care about that? And even if he has a backup plan, so what? The Border Control Corps is my Border Control Corps." Bai Qingzhao thought for a moment and nodded. Everyone could see the ending of Dijiang. In the Battle of Mount Dibing, as long as he was defeated by Li Tianlan, he would basically lose his reputation, and even be doomed eternally. This was his choice. He chose to bear all the infamy and failure. Naturally, he was mentally prepared. His failure would make Li Tianlan appear on the stage a formidable person. It would make the Wang family of Beihai lose its face. He would be scolded as a coward and even a traitor by countless people. Under such a situation, no matter whether someone in the Wang family of Beihai understood, it was impossible to clear Dijiang's name. The anger of more than 200,000 troops in the Beihai Corps needed to be vented. The anger of tens of millions of people also needed to be vented. And these, no matter right or wrong, Dijiang had to bear it. He would be kicked out of his current position and thrown away by the North Sea province like trash. Such a Dijiang naturally could not keep his position as the commander of the Border Control Corps of Zhongzhou State. He would lose everything just to leave a trace of dignity and hope for the Wang family of Beihai. Dongqing Wudi looked at the Kanglin River ahead, and the island in the Kanglin River. The Jiang family of Kanglin. Loyal, brave, and fearless. He sighed softly. Dijiang can bear this humiliation, and the 4 words that the Jiang family has been insisting on for hundreds of years. Loyal, brave, and fearless. Most of the time, it often took more courage and loyalty to bear humiliation. But a fight was a fight. Dongqing Wudi would sigh with emotion, but it was impossible for him not to take action. The hundreds of thousands of troops in the Border Control Corps were his corps. In the future, they would also be Li Tianlan's corps. He had suppressed the Beihai Corps in Beihai. Dijiang brought disgrace upon himself. He transferred the internal security forces and the heaven punishment troop, and imprisoned the patriarch of the sword-holding family. Now there was only Dijiang standing in front of him. As long as Li Tianlan went to Mount Dibing and defeated Dijiang, he would break through Beihai. Dongqing Wudi narrowed his eyes with some worry. How is Tianlan now? No news yet. Bai Qingzhao took a deep breath. Now we can't find where he is, but he should be in Floating Island City. September 4th, Kanglin Lake. The chosen one sky-chopping saber. The world was shocked. After the battle, Heaven's saber died. Li Tianlan, who had left Kanglin Island, had been silent for 3 days. Now the eyes of the whole dark world were watching Beihai. They were guessing Li Tianlan's next step, discussing his injury, and looking forward to his journey. Now inside Beihai province, there were even some news about Li Tianlan being seriously injured in the battle with the Sky Saber, or even dying had begun to appear. Dongqing Wudi and Li Tianlan talked on the phone. He could be sure that Li Tianlan's injury was not fatal, but he did not know how serious it was. But he knew very well that Li Tianlan would definitely go to Mount Dibing. He had to go forward. In the gradually dimming sky, the endless blades were still surging. There were more and more huge warships and low-flying fighters on the sea. Dongqing Wudi frowned little by little. Bai Qingzhao's phone suddenly rang. He picked up the phone and picked it up. His eyebrows suddenly rose. At the same time, the information from the floating island rushed out of the island and swept the whole dark world like a hurricane. Tianlan is moving. Bai Qingzhao looked at Dongqing Wudi and said excitedly. Dongqing Wudi suddenly turned around. On the night of September 7th, Li Tianlan, the Palace Lord of Eastern Palace, officially appeared on the floating island, Ningxin Mountain. The sword light illuminated the night sky. In less than 20 minutes, the three sword formations in the Tang Corps headquarters were completely destroyed. Tang Corps' elites suffered heavy casualties. The legendary Star Dome fell into Li Tianlan's hands. Li Tianlan struck again. On the 13th floor, the shadow sword landed on the floating island. September 8th noon. The sword light headed north. Liuli City's Yi family's #1 master, Yi Guichun, had died in battle. The crystal sword fell into Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan personally inserted the sky-edge sword into the ancestral hall of the Yi family. September 9th. The sword light replaced the morning light of the Queen City. 13-story building had killed 6 thundershocking realm experts of the Xia clan. This was the first time the Heaven's Wrath sword left the Xia clan. The Grand Orient sword had replaced Heavenly Wrath. September 10th. Shenzhou City. The hero's sword left the Shenzhou Wu clan and was replaced by Ruling Sword. The sword light that shook the entire dark world did not stop at all. On the evening of September 10th, Li Tianlan, the Palace Lord of Emperor East's palace, officially stepped into Mount Dibbing for the first time. One person. The soldiers were at the gates. Chapter 653. Li Tianlan stared at Mount Dibbing. Mount Dibbing was also staring at him. There was Shenzhou and Beihai. Outside Shenzhou City was the holy mountain in the hearts of all the people in Beihai province. It was majestic, mysterious, and beautiful. It stood on this land with its back against the sea. For hundreds of years, it had been the real power center of Beihai province. Violent wind and torrential rain. Gloomy twilight. Sharp swords and whistling wind. Everything was raging on Mount Dibbing. Under the deep sky, the majestic Mount Dibbing was dead silent, with infinite gloom and desolation at the end of its road. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the grass and trees in front of him, and the smooth mountain road. The silent Mount Dibbing was a little gloomy and ferocious. It sat here and seemed extremely stubborn. He had never liked the Wang family of Beihai. He didn't like Mount Dibbing either. He didn't like the grass and trees here either. This was the first time he had been here. He looked for a long time before he slowly gave his evaluation. It looks disgusting. You think it looks disgusting, and it also looks disgusting to you. A panting voice sounded behind Li Tianlan. The voice was laughing, but it was full of bitterness. Li Tianlan turned around in surprise. In his sight, Lin Fengting stood there, covering his chest with one hand, and his body was a little stooped. His face was pale. Looking at the dead silent Mount Dibbing, his eyes were full of complicated feelings. Li Tianlan didn't think much at all. He immediately appeared beside Lin Fengting and held him up. Lin Fengting glanced at Li Tianlan and smiled with some difficulty. Fortunately, I'm not late. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, among the few experts at the peak of the invincible realm in the world, Lin Fengting's injury was the lightest. He broke through to the peak of the invincible realm, and it didn't even affect his foundation. Now in the whole dark world, Lin Fengting could be said to be the real first person. But minor injuries were always relative. His lightest injury was also serious enough to make most invincible realm experts despair. The extremely serious internal injury was torturing his body almost all the time. Now what Lin Fengting needed most was to recuperate. From Yuzhou to Beihai, the journey was undoubtedly aggravating his injury. Li Tianlan was a little moved and whispered, "When did you wake up?" 8 hours ago. Lin Fengting's handsome and carefree face was pale and twisted at this moment, and it was extremely strenuous for him to speak. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, helped him sit on the stone beside the mountain road, and said calmly, "You can rest here. Now in Mount Dibbing, no one can threaten me." Lin Fengting wanted to say something but hesitated. A strange look flashed in his eyes. In Li Tianlan's sight, He looked in the direction of Mount Dibbing and chuckled. Now. I'm seriously injured now. Tianlan, I'm afraid any thunder-shocking realm expert can kill me, not to mention you. If you come to Mount Dibbing, I can't help you. Li Tianlan's body stiffened for a moment. He looked at Lin Fengting in silence for a long time. Lin Fengting was also silent for a long time. The twilight was filled with darkness. The wind and rain were like a waterfall, pouring down unscrupulously in the pure night. Without light, Mount Dibbing became more and more silent. Lin Fengting struggled to stand up. Without speaking to Li Tianlan, he walked silently along the mountain road. Why? For the first time, there was a trace of uncontrollable anger in Li Tianlan's voice. This anger was so intense, with a sense of oppression that could not be concealed. Lin Fengting paused and did not answer for a while. Li Tianlan looked at his back, but he completely understood what Lin Fengting meant. His injury had not been healed, and his combat capability was less than 1/10. He could not help Li Tianlan. But he came to Beihai. Lin Fengting would not do meaningless things. He came to Beihai to help. He could not help Li Tianlan, but he could help the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan laughed at himself. Lin Fengting came to Beihai to help the Wang family of Beihai. Why? He asked word by word. Lin Fengting turned to look at him with gentle eyes. Li Tianlan gradually quieted down, then became calm, and finally became as silent as Mount Dibbing. Soon after he entered the secular world, he saw Lin Fengting. The figure of the Lin clan had been mixed in the grievances between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai, intentionally or unintentionally. He seemed to be used to the feeling of Lin Fengting standing beside him. Until this moment, he understood that the Lin clan was not obliged to support him unconditionally. Lin Yuxian might have such a position, but the Lin clan would not. When the Li family was weak, the Lin clan had to protect the Li family and Li Tianlan. For the past, for the friendship of the past. Now when the Wang family of Beihai was weak, the Lin clan had to protect the Wang family of Beihai and Wang Tianzong. It was also for the past, for the friendship of the past. Lin Fengting did not know if what he did was meaningful, nor did he know what he could do to protect the Wang family of Beihai. Perhaps he had not thought about these questions. It did not matter whether he could keep it or not. What mattered was that for him, it was something he had to do. This was Lin Fengting. He was such a person. The Wang family, the Lin clan, and the Li family. When the Wang family and the Li family turned against each other, Lin Fengting was like a fool. He was extremely persistent in the grievances between the two sides. For countless years, all he did was not pleasing. But so what? He was such a person. Why? Li Tianlan asked again. Lin Fengting smiled slowly. Great pain was brewing in his body. His smile was a little bleak, but it was very real. Tianlan. How can there be so many reasons? He looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. For many things, you don't have to figure out why before you can do them. The reason is often not important. His voice was a little low. The important thing is whether we should do these things or not. I think it's what I should do, so I'm here. As for why, under the wind and rain, he was silent for a long time before he whispered, I don't know either. Your injury. Li Tianlan took a step forward. His face was calm, but there was almost boiling anger in his eyes. That kind of anger was like the most violent fire, surging endlessly. But this time, there was no complaint in his excited voice. Don't forget that your injury was all caused by Wang Tianzong. Now I am in Mount Dibbing. Do you want to stop me? Have you forgotten about your injuries? On the trial day in Eastern Europe, the devil troop caused chaos in Wulan City. When I was in a desperate situation, the Snowdance Corps risked their lives to charge. Those are my soldiers. My soldiers. More than 900 soldiers of the Snowdance Corps died in the hands of the devil troop. More than 900 people. Have you forgotten all these? On the final day, in the manor of the Samsara Palace, you were seriously injured and in a coma. As soon as the palace master left, the devil troop attacked the manor with thousands of elites from Beihai. The devil blew himself up. They wanted to kill me. If it weren't for Rushi, not only me, but also Lin Yuxian would have died there. Now Rushi is still lying in the hospital. If there is no miracle, She will be in a vegetative state for the rest of her life. Vegetative state. Vegetative state. This is all a good thing done by the Wang family of Beihai. Now I want to go up the mountain. You are my senior, and the person I respect. But now you want to fucking stop me and help the fucking Wang family of Beihai. Have you forgotten all those things before? Li Tianlan kicked on the roadside boulder engraved with the 3 characters of Mount Dibbing. The boulder, which was nearly 10 meters high, suddenly exploded under the great force. Li Tianlan's whole body was covered with rain, and his eyes were full of fierce light. Lin Fengting looked at him quietly and listened to him count the sins of the Wang family of Beihai. He only felt that the scene in front of him was very familiar. The old things were always reincarnated. In other words, what could be reincarnated were all the old things. It was unchanging, repeating itself forever. It was extremely boring. Lin Fengting was a little tired. Many years ago, it was also in Mount Dibbing. It was also raining heavily here. There was also a young man standing in front of him, counting the Li family's mistakes in an extremely excited tone. But at that time he was also very young. He smiled and whispered, "I haven't forgotten what you said." His eyes and voice were very gentle, and even somewhat open-minded, no longer as angry as in the past. "But I'm not familiar with Dongqing Wudi, and I have no affection for him. I'm not familiar with the Snowdance Corps, and I have no affection for him. What you said is actually the Li family's business, not the Lin clan's business. My entanglement with Tianzong is because of my current injuries. This is a grudge. But in the past countless years, you don't know how many times he has saved me, nor how many times he has helped the Lin clan. This is kindness." He waved his hand as if he wanted to dispel the wind and rain between him and Li Tianlan, so that they could see each other more clearly. Sometimes the world is very simple. Revenge is revenge, and kindness is repaid. But once the 2 words are put together, it is the most complicated thing in the world. If you want to go to the stage of formidable person and destroy the stone of formidable person, I won't stop you because that's your position. No, it's not bad. But I won't sit back and watch. That's my position. Tianlan, I'm still alive. As long as I'm here, I won't sit back and watch the Wang family of Beihai destroy the Li family, and I won't watch you destroy the Wang family of Beihai. I've been indecisive all my life. I've been stuck between you and me. For many years, countless patriarchs of the Lin clan have been stuck between you and me. What can I do?" In the wind and rain he laughed. "I'm such a person, and the Lin clan is such a family." Li Tianlan quietly walked to Lin Fengting and did not speak. He did not approve of what Lin Fengting did. But it didn't matter. Because this was the position of the Lin clan, and it was what Lin Fengting thought he should do. Since it was what he should do, there would be no reason, and he did not need anyone's approval. He was such a person. For such a Mount Dibbing, for such a Wang family of Beihai, is it worth it? Li Tianlan asked. Lin Fengting's eyes became more and more dazed. More than 20 years ago, here under the heavy rain, Wang Tianzong, who was also young at that time, said the same thing to him. Who was also young at that time. For such a Zhuan Yuantai, for such a Li family, is it worth it? Lin Fengting laughed. He did not know why, but he suddenly wanted to laugh. In the face of the same question, he gave the same answer as many years ago. It's worth it. Without hesitation, he was resolute. That's the kind of person he is. A voice suddenly rang out. In the heavy rain, Summer Solstice, dressed in loose ancient clothes, walked into this section of the mountain road at night. Her clothes were neat, and her expression was calm. She was as dignified as the empress of the world. There was no extra person to greet Lin Fengting. But Summer Solstice came in person, which was enough to explain everything. She glanced at Lin Fengting, bowed slightly and said softly, "Welcome." After a pause she continued, "Thank you." Lin Fengting shook his head with a smile. Summer Solstice looked at Li Tianlan, and her eyes were extremely cold. Have you ever wondered why the Li family has survived until now? With Tianzong's character, he may endure for a while. But for so many years, if the Wang family of Beihai joins forces with Kunlun City, is it difficult to wipe out the Li family? Her voice was extremely cold. If it weren't for the Lin clan's strong intervention over the years, the Li family's camp would have become a cemetery. Chapter 654. Pale lightning lit up the night sky. Summer solstice's cold and extremely calm voice spread throughout Mount Dibbing. The rainstorm became more and more chaotic. In the wind and rain, Summer Solstice was no longer the carefree little woman who raised flowers and grass. At this moment, she stood in front of Li Tianlan, exuding a kind of strong and cold demeanor. She was calm but extremely dignified. Li Tianlan looked at her for a long time. He could not see any emotion in her eyes. Only indifference. "You hate the Li family," he suddenly said in a very affirmative tone. Summer Solstice's eyes narrowed, and she did not speak. She did not hate the former Li family, but she did hate Li Guangtu, his ambition and arrogance. If nothing had happened, how wonderful would it be now? The Li family, which was still close to the Wang family of Beihai, would still have Li Tianlan, and the Wang family of Beihai would still have Wang Yuetong. This was a real match made in heaven. The Lin clan, the Wang family, and the Li family would also go in another different direction. Not like now, that's good. Li Tianlan chuckled. The flashing lightning in the sky shone on his face. His face was calm, but his smile suddenly became extremely evil. It was a real kind of unscrupulous arrogance. "We all know." He looked at Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting, and his voice was as cold as the wind from hell. "Everything is over. The so-called affection is over. You hate me, I hate you. This is the relationship between the Li family and Beihai today." He looked at Lin Fengting's increasingly bitter and helpless face and whispered, "The Lin clan and Beihai have affection. The Li family and the Lin clan have affection. But the Li family and the Wang family, I and the Wang family, only have hatred." His voice rushed out of the mountain road and swept around like thunder. "My Li family and Beihai are just enemies. The most difficult thing in everything was purity. Purity was the best. The Li family was his Li family. Today, what he stood here and said was the rule of the Li family in the future. Or the rule. The Li family and the Wang family were mortal enemies forever." Lin Fengting smiled bitterly and shook his head. They did not agree. Summer Solstice seemed to be too lazy to look at Li Tianlan again. She reached out to support Lin Fengting's body and said softly, "Let's go up the mountain." Lin Fengting looked at Li Tianlan deeply and said softly, "Leave a way out for everything. Tianlan, you know my bottom line. I also said something to Tianzong back then. Now it's yours." His voice was soft and firm. "If we cross that line, the Li family will be the mortal enemy of the Lin clan in the future. I won't rest until one of us dies." It was not a threat. Instead, it was the clearest stance. The Lin clan must protect the Li family and the Wang family. At all costs. That was the kind of person he was. The Lin clan was also such a family. In the face of the remaining Li family and Lin Fengting's bottom line, Wang Tianzong finally chose not to cross that line, and gave up the plan to cooperate with Kunlun City to squeeze the Li family. Today, Lin Fengting did not know what Li Tianlan would choose. Li Tianlan was expressionless. At this moment, no one knew what he was thinking. Lin Fengting didn't say anything more. He turned around and walked along the mountain path to the top of the mountain. The howling wind and torrential rain were still raging all over the mountains and plains. Li Tianlan stood still and watched Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting's backs getting farther and farther away. He was as solemn as a statue. Mount Dibbing became quieter and quieter. Darkness and wind and rain shrouded the stage of Formidable Person. On the stage of Formidable Person, most of the core figures of the Wang family of Beihai stood there quietly, staring at the enemy at the foot of the mountain in the distance. The night was too dark, the rain was too heavy, and the distance was too far. Almost no one could see Li Tianlan's figure. But the strong humiliation slowly pressed down like the dark night in the sky. The glorious Mount Dibbing seemed to have become dim from the first day that the young man stepped into Beihai. Until tonight, there was no more brilliance. Dijiang stood alone at the entrance of the stage of Formidable Person. The power as vigorous as the sea was slowly undulating in his body. The first disciple of the Sword Emperor with double thunder veins had risen to the extreme in both willpower and fighting desire. Seeing Summer Solstice and Lin Fengting walking over together, Dijiang was slightly stunned, but he didn't say anything. He just bowed deeply to Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting smiled and passed by Dijiang. He saw many familiar people, many of whom represented the present and future of the Wang family of Beihai. There were Wang Yuetong, Wang Qinglei, Song Xiai, and Tang Shi, the future hostess of the Wang family of Beihai. Lin Fengting watched all this quietly and kept silent for a long time. There are too many people, he whispered to himself. There were far more people on the stage of formidable person than what he saw. There were more people he knew, but was not familiar with. Most of the core members of the Wang family of Beihai were standing here. Some were high officials in the political circle, and some were patriarchs of the major branches of Beihai. There were so many of them that the number was close to 50. They stood there and almost filled the entire stage of formidable person. Don't worry, Summer Solstice said softly. These people are not standing here to fight with Li Tianlan. Lin Fengting looked at Dijiang and said nothing. Summer Solstice seemed to understand what he was thinking and said faintly, Hong Wei meant to send everyone including me to a safe place, but I didn't agree. Instead, I gathered all the important people here. Tonight's battle, no matter who wins or loses, is the most important day for the Wang family of Beihai in recent decades. I won't let them fight with Li Tianlan. But as a member of the Wang family of Beihai, they have the obligation to remember today's humiliation. They must. He looked at Dijiang and said calmly, they must also remember the person who bore all the failures and curses for them today. Lin Fengting's mouth moved, but he said nothing. He could see that Li Tianlan was very sober. Entering Autumn Water, breaking Tongtian, suppressing Kanglin, passing Floating Island, sweeping all the way to Shengzhou and Mount Dibing. It could be said that Li Tianlan's journey was stained with blood. But so far, no important person who could really affect the overall situation of Beihai and the interests of Zhongzhou state had died under Li Tianlan's sword. Heaven's Saber DK was a real heavyweight, but his saber was still sealed. His death caused a huge loss to the Jiang family, but it had little impact on Beihai and no impact on Zhongzhou state. Huangfu Feiyu, the famous general of the Huangfu family, was seriously injured, but it was not fatal. The Chen family suffered a great loss, but a large number of important people were also there. Li Tianlan's actions were accurate and almost insidious. He penetrated Beihai and weakened the most important elites of the major sword-holding families. He made them suffer a great loss, but he didn't touch the bottom line of Zhongzhou state. He didn't kill any important people, but he severely weakened the force of the major sword-holding families by several levels. It didn't matter whether his actions caused a great uproar or caused more undercurrents in Zhongzhou state. At least on the surface, Zhongzhou state still kept silent about Li Tianlan's current actions. So Lin Fengting didn't worry about the safety of these people. He came just to stop Li Tianlan from going to the stage of formidable person. No matter whether Dijiang bore the infamy or not, Li Tianlan standing on the stage of formidable person meant that he completely trampled on the Wang family of Beihai. In the absence of Wang Tianzong, the prestige of Mount Dibing would decline, and there would only be one ending: division. Lin Fengting glanced at Wang Qinglei and sighed softly. Everything he did must ensure the integrity of the Wang family. How's his injury? Lin Fengting asked slowly in silence. His voice was so soft that only Summer Solstice could hear him. There was no doubt that he was asking about Wang Tianzong. Summer Solstice smiled bitterly. She had nothing to hide from Lin Fengting. The patriarch of the Lin clan in front of her was her childhood playmate. Not to mention how tangled his position was. Such a person, even as an enemy, was the kind of enemy that could be absolutely trusted. Not so good, she said slowly and then shook her head. It should be very bad. He has been in a deep coma, and now he has no self-consciousness at all. Lin Fengting subconsciously clenched his fists. Before the beginning of the day of eradication, he knew about the 13-story building and the power of this sword. He wasn't surprised about Wang Tianzong's injury, but he didn't expect that it would be so serious. That was the Sword Emperor, a person who had created countless miracles. Lin Fengting looked at the knight at the foot of the mountain, and was silent for a long time. Then he said softly, according to your estimation, How long will it take for Tianzong to recover? Summer Solstice's eyes were a little dazed. How long would it take for Wang Tianzong to recover? She didn't dare to think about it at all. It could even be said that she had never thought about it. In Wang Tianzong's current state, the injury would be the next step. Recovery was the next step. What she needed to consider now was how to keep Wang Tianzong alive. Things had indeed gotten to this point. Wang Tianzong was now wandering between life and death. Summer Solstice saw the process of the 13-story building's birth and understood some of its principles, but only a small part. These might bring some help to Wang Tianzong, but the premise was that Wang Tianzong had to get through the current crisis, and Summer Solstice could help him. And such help, at most, the most optimistic result was that it could keep him from dying for the time being. The injury would be healed. Summer Solstice was in a trance and murmured, "I don't know." Lin Fengting's heart sank slightly, and then he realized that the situation might be more serious than he thought. But when he thought of that sword, he didn't feel surprised. "I don't understand." Summer Solstice's voice was very calm. "Third brother, do you know about the 13-story building?" Third brother. It was really a long-lost address. Lin Fengting felt a little emotional in his heart, but he didn't speak when he heard Summer Solstice's question. "That's the real sword of the Chosen One, the invincible sword. The problem is, in the Dark World for hundreds of years, only Tianzong has reached this realm. Then why is there such a sword in Eastern Europe? Who is the legendary Dongqing Huangtu?" She looked at Lin Fengting and said quietly, "I know you know. Who is he?" Lin Fengting smiled bitterly. "I know." He paused and whispered, "But I don't know how to say it." Summer Solstice looked at Lin Fengting for a long time. "I still don't understand," she said slowly. "Even if Dongqing Huangtu really exists and is really the Chosen One, how could his sword cause such serious damage to Tianzong? That night in Eastern Europe, Tianzong's swordsmanship was supreme. I don't believe anyone can surpass Tianzong at that time. Dongqing Huangtu stood at the same height as Tianzong at most. Even if the master of Samsara Palace can copy Dongqing Huangtu's sword, it shouldn't pose too much of a threat to Tianzong." That night, the Eternal Sword Light was indeed the most powerful sword move of the Chosen One at his peak. But Wang Tianzong was also the Chosen One, and there was no reason for him to be so seriously injured. In fact, not only did Summer Solstice underestimate Wang Tianzong's injury, but even Wang Tianzong underestimated his own injury, and it was a serious underestimation. "That sword move," Lin Fengting thought for a moment and whispered, "It's not what you think." It was a sword formation. Lin Fengting whispered, 13 half-step invincible realm experts who were telepathically connected assisted Flaming Fire, who was close to the peak of the invincible realm. Flaming Fire burst out with all her strength to condense sword intent and send it to the master of Samsara Palace at the peak of the invincible realm. In fact, all this was not for that sword move at all. 13 experts at the peak of the invincible realm, Flaming Fire, and the master of Samsara Palace did not do everything to copy that sword move. The master of Samsara Palace condensed only sword intent at that time, and that sword intent was completely poured into Xian Yuanfeng. He smiled bitterly. It was Xian Yuanfeng who really made that sword move. Strictly speaking, that sword move is really the best in the world, because even Dongqing Huangtu can't make such a move, let alone the master of Samsara Palace. Xian Yuanfeng's sword move is more powerful than Dongqing Huangtu's own move. It's normal that Tianzong can't take it, but that's equivalent to 2 Tianzongs. Summer Solstice's voice was very stubborn. She had taken the immortality potion, but she still fell into this situation. It was easy to imagine what that meant. Lin Fengting stopped talking. He suddenly thought of the master of Samsara Palace, who was in a worse situation than Wang Tianzong. An emotion called fear continued to spread in his heart, turning into the deepest chill. He looked in the direction of Li Tianlan and kept silent for a long time. At this moment, Lin Fengting really felt fear. He was afraid that Li Tianlan would find out the truth. So everything that happened today was just a rehearsal. If the truth was exposed in front of Li Tianlan, what would happen? He looked back at the stage of formidable person behind him, at everyone on the stage of formidable person, at Summer Solstice, and at Dijiang. If Li Tianlan found out the truth one day, in the entire Mount Dibbing, there might be no one alive in the 7 sword-holding families. That was the last thing Lin Fengting wanted to see. Maybe that was also the last thing Li Tianlan wanted to see. Chapter 655. Summer Solstice noticed Lin Fengting's strangeness at once. He tried to hide his expression in the dark wind and rain, but his eyes flickered with helplessness and bitterness that were close to despair. "What's wrong?" Summer Solstice asked aloud. Lin Fengting shook his head. He didn't know what to say or even what to do. Wang Tianzong could still wander between life and death. But the master of Samsara Palace had completely stepped into the gate of death. No one knew that the master of Samsara Palace was still in the Lin clan. Even few people in the Lin clan knew. Now the master of Samsara Palace had no vitality in her body. She was barely alive with the last breath. Lin Fengting couldn't describe the state that was infinitely close to quietus. The battle in Eastern Europe was too tragic. The master of Samsara Palace thought that everything was flawless. Li Tianlan's world was already clear, but the truth hidden in the dark was like a bottomless abyss, quietly devouring everything. Lin Fengting took a deep breath. Maybe that day would come when he really had to make a choice. But fortunately, it was not today. So Wang Tianzong still had time. The master of Samsara Palace also had time. "You didn't answer my question." Summer Solstice took a deep look at Lin Fengting and said quietly, "The truth about that sword stroke about Dongqing Huangtu." Summer Solstice lowered her head and said softly in a trembling voice, "Third brother, please." Lin Fengting's figure was slightly stiff, and then he calmed down. "The truth is boring, and you may not be willing to believe it. Speaking of that sword stroke, the current result is not unexpected. Tianzong was indeed invincible in Eastern Europe, and no one could surpass him. But human power is limited after all. In the face of that sword stroke," he thought for a moment. Even if Dongqing Huangtu himself stood there with immortality, he couldn't stop that sword stroke, let alone Tianzong with immortality. He laughed self-deprecatingly. Although that is his swordsmanship. "Why?" Summer Solstice stared at Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting didn't look at her, but looked in the direction of Li Tianlan and whispered, "You're about to see it." That was also the purpose of his visit today. "Do you know why I'm here?" he asked with a smile. Xie Zhi looked at Lin Fengting with some doubts. Of course, she knew the purpose of Lin Fengting's visit, but she didn't know the specific reason. Lin Fengting coughed. "I'm seriously injured now. When I was in Eastern Europe, Tianzong didn't want to kill me, but he didn't show mercy when he could spare my life. When he wakes up, I'll settle the score with him. But the current situation is that my current combat strength is not even as good as that of an ordinary thunder-shocking realm expert, or even a fire-flaming realm expert. In terms of combat, I can't help Tianlan, so naturally I can't help you." He took a few deep breaths and said hoarsely, "I'm just a way out, a way for both of you to step down. If I don't come, you won't talk seriously." "There's nothing to talk about," Summer Solstice said coldly. "We will not hand over the Devil Troop, nor will we apologize to the Snowdance Corps and the Dongqing clan. Dijiang is hardly a match for Tianlan." Lin Fengting shook his head. "You don't have any bargaining chips. Hongwei can't, but I can." Summer Solstice's voice was extremely calm. "If you force your hand, no matter what happens to Tianlan, how good will your end be?" Lin Fengting shook his head. "If something happens to you," he said meaningfully, "Sheng Xiao is still in Eastern Europe with Wang Xiaoyao." Summer Solstice's calm eye suddenly had a touch of fierce and violent madness. But behind this madness was so helplessness. She gritted her teeth and said word by word, "This is my own business. You have scruples. So you haven't made a move, and you can't do your best. Even if you risk everything, can you really kill Li Tianlan?" Summer Solstice's foundation was half ruined now, and she had no realm. But in an instant, her strength would not be inferior to any expert at the peak of the invincible realm, including deity, Lin Fengting, and even Wang Tianzong before the breakthrough. Li Tianlan would not be a match for Summer Solstice, even if he had the 13th floor. But if he couldn't beat her, he might not die. Once summer solstice made a move, the consequences were almost doomed. Think about the Beihai he sees when he wakes up. Once you die, how good will Shengxiao be in Eastern Europe? Is that Beihai what he wants? Lin Fengting asked. A gaze suddenly fell on Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting turned his head and looked over. In the crowd, beside Wang Yuetong, Song Xiai stood there quietly and looked at him with pure eyes. Lin Fengting suddenly thought of an ending. That was the era of women. He smiled, looked at Song Xiai, and said softly, "You can't support Beihai. Even if you can, it must be very hard. That's not what you want." Song Xi's small mouth opened slightly, and she looked stunned and inexplicable. Lin Fengting shook his head and didn't say much. "I can kill him." Summer Solstice was silent for a long time before she slowly opened her mouth. She didn't say the consequences, but repeatedly emphasized this fact. No matter how tragic her consequences would be, she stood here and had the power to threaten Li Tianlan's life and death. Naturally, she had the bargaining chip to negotiate with Li Tianlan at the last moment. Lin Fengting hesitated and didn't say much. He wanted to say that summer solstice could indeed kill Li Tianlan now, but not necessarily in a while. He wanted to say that if he really wanted to stop Li Tianlan, he should immediately transfer away the devil troop lying in ambush in Mount Dibbing. But the devil troop was Li Tianlan's goal. Transfer away? Then there was no way to talk about it. So he didn't say much and sat there quietly, waiting for the moment when he could play the role of a stepping stone. The wind and rain were messy. The stage of formidable person was silent. The foot of Mount Dibbing was also silent. Li Tianlan had been standing in the wind and rain for a long time. The wind and rain swept over with a chill. His previous injuries were suppressed little by little. All the anger gradually subsided. Li Tianlan's eyes became more focused and pure. The road to the mountain was ahead. His road. No one could stop him from moving forward. The 13-story building, with only a few swords left, flew around him. Li Tianlan looked up at the top of the mountain, and slowly took a step. "Who dares to fight with me?" The next second his voice sounded in the whole range of Mount Dibbing. It was calm and confident. "Forward." He took the second step. "Who is qualified to fight with me?" The voice spread from the foot of the mountain with wind and rain and endless darkness. At this moment, the whole Beihai was silent. Endless sword energy surged and gathered behind Li Tianlan with the most violent momentum. His figure moved forward along the path. There were more and more sword energy. The path was winding. At the end was the top of the mountain. The vast palaces were continuous, sitting in a large area of flowers and grass. They were quiet, beautiful, majestic, and dignified, with an inviolable sense of solemnity. But at this moment, there was no light on the top of the mountain. All the palaces were in the dark, only gloomy. This was the Wang family of Beihai. The whole picture of the Wang family of Beihai appeared in front of Li Tianlan for the first time. Li Tianlan smiled and said faintly, "Just SOSO." He turned around and looked back at the mountain road where he came from. The extremely gloomy and beautiful scenery was very beautiful. He said again, "Just SOSO." With his voice, the sword intent that had been gathering behind him suddenly began to roar and surge. There seemed to be countless long swords rubbing and colliding between heaven and earth. The sound was uniform and sharp. It suppressed the wind and rain in Mount Dibbing, suppressed the surging tide in Beihai, and overshadowed the muffled thunder between heaven and earth. Boom! A deafening roar rang out without warning. It seemed that there were thousands of swords roaring and slashing at the same time. The bright sword light illuminated the entire mountain road of Mount Dibbing in an instant, as if it was spreading in daylight. The surging sword light tore the mountain road of Mount Dibbing in an instant. The sword energy flew in all directions, like a shining ring, constantly spreading. The extremely chaotic sound kept ringing with the spreading of the sword light, from the foot of the mountain to the top. The mountain road that had passed by countless people, including countless high-ranking officials, generals, and bigwigs, was suddenly completely torn apart by the sword light. The sword light rushed into the forest on both sides of the road like a tide. The quaint pavilion, the sea of flowers, the neat trees, the flat grass, the clear lake. The sword chi continued to wreak havoc on Mount Dibbing. tearing everything it encountered. It was like countless storms blowing over Mount Dibbing at the same time. In the surging sword light, everything on the way to Mount Dibbing had become riddled with holes in an instant. In the darkness of the wind and rain, the collapsed pavilion, the muddy lake, the broken forest, the broken flowers, and the gully road. After the beauty was torn apart, the ugliness first appeared on Mount Dibbing, looking extremely ferocious. It covered thousands of meters and kept whistling, leaving a conspicuous scar on the incomparably beautiful Mount Dibbing. At this moment, many people looked at this scene in a daze, their hearts dead. The great sense of shame made everyone's eyes red on the stage of formidable person. Only Wang Yuetong stood there quietly. She didn't move, and even her aura didn't change. But the crystal tears were like beads with broken strings, flowing silently. Li Tianlan's figure was still moving forward. In the heavy rain, every pore on his body seemed to be shining, blooming with sword intent. Endless sword intent flew out from the soles of his feet, and the roaring sound of breaking was continuous. The continuous palaces of Mount Dibbing, which cost a lot, were torn apart one after another. The endless sword light shone on Li Tianlan's face. His expression was calm and dignified. Boom! Emperor Hall, where Sword Emperor and Summer Solstice usually lived, suddenly broke into pieces. All the furniture and appliances inside were torn into pieces. At this moment, Li Tianlan was like a giant waving a weapon, destroying everything on the majestic Mount Dibbing, leaving scars one after another. The holy mountain in the hearts of everyone in Beihai province had become fragmented in the blink of an eye. The surging sword light ravaged the palaces one after another. Li Tianlan's pace was getting faster and faster. The sword light was getting sharper and sharper. Broken wood, walls, and broken appliances kept flying. Crack! The moment the sword light fell, a special sound, as if standing on a heavy alloy, suddenly sounded. Li Tianlan suddenly turned his head. The world quieted down quietly, without any warning. In the darkness, the sky was full of red light. The scarlet light lit up the night and the rain. The heavy rain was like blood that kept falling. North, south, east, west. Left and right sides. In 6 directions, the scarlet light became a hole in an instant. It seemed to be the densest domain, directly locking Li Tianlan in the middle. One figure after another appeared around Li Tianlan. Devil Troop. 6 devils. They surrounded Li Tianlan, but they were far away from Li Tianlan. Countless scarlet lights bloomed from their eyes and flowed to their whole bodies. Thunder roared in the sky. The lightning turned scarlet. In the sudden silence, the 6 devils raised their arms at the same time. This time, they were not empty-handed. Each of the 6 devils held a sword in his hand. The sound of the long sword being unsheathed suddenly resounded through the night sky. With red light, the sword energy soared into the sky. In the east, he started with the sword of King Path of the Wang family of Beihai. The awe-inspiring sword energy kept whistling and blending in the heavy rain. In the west, the sword of Deceitful Path. In the south, the sword of Overbearing Path. In the north, the sword of Emperor Path. On the left, the sword of Saint Path. On the right, the sword of Heavenly Path. The sword light was like a tide. In an instant, it gathered in the domain that surrounded Li Tianlan. 6 sword lights with countless sword energy began to blend like angry waves. The center of the sword lights was Li Tianlan. This was the sword of 6 paths of the Wang family of Beihai. This was the devil troop of the Wang family of Beihai. This was the latest devil with swordsmanship instinct and self-awareness. It was the only group of trump cards in the Wang family of Beihai that could still kill the enemy with swordsmanship. They were all from the Wang family. Swordsmanship and sword intent were interlinked. The sword lights gathered. 6 paths of reincarnation. There was the 6 paths of reincarnation sword. Naturally, there was the 6 paths of reincarnation formation. The scarlet sword light rising into the sky gradually filled the scarlet domain. The sword energy in different directions became more and more majestic. The edge of the sword energy began to converge. Countless sword chis began to fuse together. It was an almost perfect blend. 6 swords in 6 directions almost became one sword in the blink of an eye. This sword, with awe-inspiring and crazy killing intent, was enough to split heaven and earth. This was the ambush that the devil troop had planned for a long time. At this moment, Li Tianlan was standing in the center of the ambush of the 6 devils. So this sword was perfect. Although the power of the 6 people's joint attack was not at the peak of the invincible realm, it was equivalent to the 6 paths of reincarnation, made by an invincible realm expert with all his strength. This sword alone was enough to hurt Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the sword light that was getting closer and closer. There was no solemnity in his eyes. Instead, there was some confusion, then joy, and finally joy. He couldn't figure out why he was ambushed by the devil troop. Did the Wang family of Beihai think that the devils could fight with him without exploding themselves if they stood far enough away? Under the wind and rain, in the scarlet light, he laughed. The 13-story building appeared in front of him. Li Tianlan held the Xianyuan sword. This time, to his surprise, the Xianyuan sword suddenly shook in his hand, as if it wanted to break free. Li Tianlan was stunned and subconsciously loosened his hand. Buzz! A clear sound suddenly rang between heaven and earth. The pitch-black Xianyuan sword burst out with an incomparably faint and distant clear light. The water-like light illuminated the scarlet domain in an instant. On the stage of Formidable Person, the moment the clear sound rang, Summer Solstice's face changed dramatically. Her body almost jumped up in an instant. She was no longer calm and composed. She stared in Li Tianlan's direction, her body trembling. Her face was twisted as if she had seen a ghost in broad daylight. With an incredible emotion, she asked, "What is that?" Chapter 656. People tend to show different reactions when they are absolutely surprised and shocked. At this moment, every reaction of Summer Solstice had reached the extreme. The wisp of clear light was faint, distant, and not striking, yet it seemed like the clearest color in the world. Light bloomed in the blood-colored domain. It was neither fast nor slow, but it seemed to have a power that could suppress everything. Summer Solstice's body was frozen in a very strange posture. Her pupils dilated, her breathing quickened, and her body trembled. The hostess of the Wang family of Beihai, who had always been calm, was in a trance at this time. Her expression was so complicated that it was completely indescribable. At this moment, she didn't even know what she was seeing. Was it an illusion? Or was it an illusion? In the blood-colored domain, that wisp of clear light was still blossoming, not too fast nor too slow. Its speed was extremely slow, but it was incomparably heavy, suppressing everything. The moment the clear light spread out, the originally incomparably violent 6 paths of reincarnation array seemed to completely stop. Summer Solstice stared at this scene. Except for Lin Fengting, no one here, not even Dijiang, knew what this scene meant. Summer Solstice suddenly closed her eyes. The surrounding space began to distort in a visible manner. Summer Solstice gradually straightened her body and became extremely focused. Lin Fengting glanced at her. "You're not hypnotized." His voice was a little complicated. "Everything you see is real. In fact, have you ever seen an expert at the peak of the invincible realm be hypnotized?" Even if Summer Solstice's foundation was half ruined, she was still at the peak of the invincible realm. A spirit master who was infinitely close to the transcendent realm might be able to mislead ordinary experts of the invincible realm for a short time, but it was impossible for her to trick experts at the peak of the invincible realm. When she was in Eastern Europe, facing Jiang Qiansong, who was close to the peak of the invincible realm, Qin Weibai had tried her best to destroy his will first and let him fall into her trap when he was extremely weak and exhausted. Therefore, everything in front of Summer Solstice was real. Summer Solstice opened her eyes. Her face was deathly pale. Some things were inconceivable, inexplicable, and unexpected. When it happened in front of his eyes, that huge shock would eventually form the clearest emotion: disbelief. How is this possible? Her body swayed and she almost fell. Song Xiai, who was closest to her, quickly supported her body. "This is what you should see," Lin Fengting said. "Now do you understand why Tianzong couldn't block that sword?" 13th floor. Xianyuan Feng. Summer Solstice vaguely understood something. Looking at the clear light in the distance, she was silent for a long time. Is this the one strike you mentioned? She slowly turned her head and looked at Lin Fengting. Because she was too emotional, her voice became a little shrill. If it's not a sword, what is it? Lin Fengting asked. Summer Solstice smiled bitterly. 13 floors, 13 swords. If Xianyuan Feng is like this, what about the others? It's all the same. Lin Fengting said. Summer Solstice's face was stiff. This time she couldn't even smile bitterly. It was not until this moment that she understood why Wang Tianzong was so seriously injured. He also understood why the coldness of the 9 states created by the human emperor would be completely broken and would require a long time to repair. It turned out that Wang Tianzong was not worse than Dongqing Huangtu. It was not that the coldness of Jiuzhou was inferior to Xianyuan Feng. All of this was because of the clear light in front of him, or rather, because of the colorful lights over Eastern Europe. She looked at the scarlet domain that was gradually suppressed by the clear light, and thought of the 6 members of the devil troop from the Wang family of Beihai. This was the trump card that Wang Tianzong left for her. 6 devils from the Wang family of Beihai, and they had a very special position in the devil troop. They were one of the most important resources of the Wang family of Beihai. The 6 of them formed a formation. After being transformed and frozen, their strength was not as strong as before. But when the 6 of them attacked at the same time, their cooperation in an instant could still be said to be invincible. Summer Solstice had thought that this strike could seriously injure Li Tianlan. In addition to the injury caused by the Heaven Saber, even if he could defeat Dijiang in the end, he would certainly have little combat power. But now, when that clear light shone, she knew that she was wrong, and she was extremely wrong. The 6 devils injected all their energy into the sword formation in front of them. For Li Tianlan it was not a trouble, but a real surprise. Why is this happening? Summer Solstice said softly, her voice almost whispering. Who knows? Lin Fengting said blandly. If you force it to be explained, it can only be fate. He looked in the direction of the clear light and said softly, you really had a chance to pull him into Mount Dibbing. It was the best chance. You would accept him, and he would fully accept you. He would join hands with Sheng Xiao, and with the assistance of Dijiang, the Wang family of Beihai would be truly invincible in the world, even surpassing the peak period. What a good opportunity. His voice was a little mocking. But you gave up. Summer Solstice lowered her head and smiled a little miserably. I know who Dongqing Huangtu is. Lin Fengting did not speak. In his sight, the clear light that illuminated the night spread unstoppably to the entire scarlet domain. He looked at it quietly, with a complicated look in his eyes. Li Tianlan was also looking at this clear light, and his eyes were a little gratified. This was not his sword energy, but it was his sword. The palm-sized Xianyuan sword was exquisite and perfect. Li Tianlan let go of it. The delicate black sword was floating and trembling in front of Li Tianlan. An endless clear light burst out from the sword. The dazzling light was heavy and clear, covering the entire domain. The sword energy of the 6 devils seemed to be absorbed by the clear light emitted by the Xianyuan sword in an instant. The devils stood where they were. The scarlet light constantly flashed in their eyes, as if expressing countless emotions. But their bodies were all stiff where they were. The red domain disappeared. The clear light dispelled all the scarlet. Looking from a distance, the domain covered by the light of the Xianyuan sword was like a huge and pure light shield. The light shield enveloped Li Tianlan and the 6 members of the devil troop. A strong and joyful mood was constantly being transmitted inside the light shield. All the remaining small swords in the 13-story building appeared around Li Tianlan. The black body of the Xianyuan sword shone more and more, like a crystal-clear black jade. The heartbreaking sword lit up. The stunning sword lit up. The aquamarine sword lit up. The sunset sword lit up. The silver moon sword lit up. The joyful mood became more and more obvious, and it was completely transmitted to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan smiled. In the pure light, he smiled like a child. It was still raining heavily. Mount Dibbing was still gloomy. He stood in the extremely dazzling and pure light, stretched out his hand and waved. The 13-story building was broken in an instant. The remaining 6 swords flew out in a rush. All the swords lit up. The sword lights of various colors kept flashing in the pure light shield, becoming more and more obvious. It was an extremely gorgeous picture. In the hearts of everyone in the Wang family of Beihai, it was also an extremely horrifying picture. Summer Solstice was watching, Di Jiang was watching, and Lin Fengting was watching. Wang Yuetong, Song Xiai, Tang Shi, and Wang Qinglei. Everyone was watching the picture, and no one spoke. In the dead silence, Di Jiang, who stood in front of everyone, suddenly laughed. The solemnity condensed on him completely disappeared with his smile. His entire being suddenly became extremely relaxed. There was nothing to think about. The so-called luck, the so-called possibility, the so-called hope. There was no need to think about it. He looked at the light in the distance. The battle had not yet begun, but the result was already determined. Di Jiang let go of everything. He turned around and looked at the people of the Wang family of Beihai behind him, and at the stone of formidable person facing the sea and the wind and rain on the stage of formidable person. After a long time, the corners of his mouth moved, but he did not speak. He slowly turned around and walked toward Li Tianlan. The clear sound that seemed to be breaking kept echoing in his body. It seemed to be breaking, but it also seemed to be growing. Di Jiang's body relaxed, and so did his heart. He walked down the narrow steps, and as he went down, his figure became heavier and heavier. Lin Fengting's eyes slightly condensed, and he seemed to feel some pity. Di Jiang, he whispered, he is indeed a genius. Summer Solstice was silent and did not speak. At the most critical moment, Di Jiang, who had been tense and adjusting his state, let go of everything. He just wanted to fight. And the pure fighting intent completely bloomed when he was most relaxed, stimulating all his potential. He broke through. It was not the breakthrough of the realm, but the breakthrough of the body. He still had the combat capability of the invincible realm, but not the real invincible realm. At this moment, it was the dual thunder veins in his body that broke through. It also meant that Di Jiang had completely broken through the last threshold to enter the invincible realm, or even the peak of the invincible realm. Summer Solstice looked at Di Jiang's back and the light in the distance, and suddenly said, I can talk to Li Tianlan. She stood up. Lin Fengting shook his head with a bitter smile. Now, the corner of his mouth moved. At this moment, he really wanted to ask Summer Solstice, what were you doing earlier? But when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he suddenly found that what he should ask most was what he had done earlier. If he had done it earlier, he would have been in a coma and could not remind Summer Solstice of anything. And even if he had, Summer Solstice might not have believed it. After all, some things were too incredible. Who could believe it without seeing it with their own eyes? He could understand Summer Solstice's thoughts. No one understood the 13 floors. No one in the Wang family of Beihai could even understand the Xianyuan sword. So Summer Solstice had the capital and qualification to persist. Li Tianlan broke through Beihai province, killed the Heaven Saber, and could even defeat Di Jiang. But she was still there. She thought that if she killed Li Tianlan by force, Li Tianlan could not stop her. She did not want to die, and she believed that Li Tianlan did not want to die either. When both sides did not want to die, in a stalemate, even if the Wang family of Beihai negotiated, it was relatively equal. And now, with the appearance of the clear light, Li Tianlan was still no match for Summer Solstice. But the 13 floors was different from before. Wasn't it too late to negotiate with Li Tianlan at this time? It's not the right time yet, Lin Fengting whispered. Summer Solstice glanced at Lin Fengting and said expressionlessly, when is the right time? When Beihai has no choice but to bow its head and bear the humiliation, when he feels that it's enough. He won't destroy the Wang family, but he doesn't want to leave you any hope. Lin Fengting whispered. He has arrived at Mount Dibbing. How can he negotiate before he comes up? He looked at Di Jiang's back and whispered, let him go. The devil troop fell. Di Jiang failed. Only when he really broke through everything and stood in front of the Wang family of Beihai, Li Tianlan's inner depression might be completely released, and he would accept the so-called negotiation, or in other words, sue for peace. Everyone was looking into the distance. In the middle of the palace ruins in the distance, The clear light was still bright, but it had shrunk a lot. The light shield obliterated the domain of the devil troop, and gradually shrank into a beam of light connecting heaven and earth. The 6 evil demons had silently disappeared along with the shrinking of the light barrier. Dijiang's figure was getting farther and faster. He walked out of the path, walked past the World Palace, walked past the only preserved palace behind Mount Dibbing, and stood in front of the beam of light, looking calmer. This beam of light was extremely dazzling. Dijiang was very close to Li Tianlan, but he could not see Li Tianlan's expression at all. The beam of light shook slowly and gradually faded. In the endless light, Li Tianlan slowly walked out. The 13 floors floated around him, shining as if it was ushering in a real new life. Li Tianlan walked steadily and slowly. He looked at Dijiang, raised his eyebrows slightly, and asked, "Do you want to die?" Chapter 657. No one thought Li Tianlan's words were arrogant. The 6 demons, who were thought to be able to bring Li Tianlan great trouble, fell silently. It was a process that was enough to make everyone in North Sea feel numb. To be exact, it was not even a battle, but the most terrifying devouring. The clear light occupied the demon domain and slowly shrank. After everything was over, the demon army also disappeared. Li Tianlan. 13th floor. The man and the sword were perfect. Mount Dibbing was desolate. There were ruins everywhere, silent and dilapidated. In the past few hundred years, this was the first time an outsider had come here to talk about life and death. It was so domineering and natural. Dijiang looked at Li Tianlan quietly and the delicate small swords floating around him. The black Xianyuan sword shone with a dim light, drifting outside Li Tianlan's sword qi. It was outside Li Tianlan's sword qi, but it could merge with it at any time. Such a Li Tianlan was very dangerous. Such a Xianyuan sword was even more dangerous. Dijiang suddenly realized that he was no match for the Xianyuan sword at this moment. He laughed softly and said calmly, "It's over." "After you die," Li Tianlan said. Blue light shone on Dijiang's body bit by bit. Emperor Zhang's smile grew wider. "You dare kill me?" This was the first time Dijiang had called himself that. He was the marshal of Zhongzhou State and the commander of the Border Control Corps. No matter where he was, no matter what position he took, this identity would not change. Li Tianlan was also the marshal of Zhongzhou State. He killed Dijiang, which was not only touching the bottom line of the high-level officials of Zhongzhou State, but also blatantly stepping on the faces of all high-level officials of Zhongzhou State. Once such a thing happened, even Dongqing Wudi could not speak for him. "I won't kill you," Li Tianlan said calmly. "But the Wang family of Beihai will kill you. Not many people will understand you. Not many people will know that you are saving strength for the Wang family of Beihai. Even if they know, they may not accept it." Li Tianlan looked around and said, "Everything today, these ruins, these humiliation, is because you transferred the power of Mount Dibbing away in advance. This is what I brought to them. But it is also what you brought to them. No one will understand you. Even if I die, it will be a worthy death." Dijiang's voice grew calmer. Unafraid of death, Li Tianlan smiled. The 13-story pagoda slowly disappeared around him. He withdrew all the sword qi and suddenly said, "There is another position in Emperor Dong's palace. Are you interested?" He knew that he was talking nonsense, but in many cases, nonsense still had an extraordinary meaning. His voice echoed on Mount Dibbing, and was transmitted to the ears of everyone on the stage of formidable person. As long as you join Emperor Dong's palace, everything in Eastern Europe can be handed over to you. Li Tianlan's eyes were deep, and he said blandly, "In the future Beihai province, the entire Beihai province, can also be handed over to you, to the Jiang family." The stage of formidable person was silent. Dijiang's expression changed abruptly. This sentence did not have much meaning at the moment. But once he failed, when all the curses were added to him, there would always be someone who would think of Li Tianlan's recruitment and huge promise, and there would always be someone who would bring it up. For example, Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaorao. In the hearts of everyone in Beihai, with Li Tianlan's words, Dijiang and even the Jiang family would always have another choice. This was something that no one wanted to see. Only the dead would not choose. Li Tianlan's words were tantamount to blocking all his chances after his failure. This was a real heart-wrenching remark. Di Jiang took a deep breath. The amazing blue light spread from the soles of his feet to his whole body. An enormous power slowly surged, and the lightning surrounding him had already turned from a faint blue to an incomparably deep and demonic dark blue. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and smiled playfully. Don't you want to think about it? You know the answer, Di Jiang said blandly. At this moment, he finally remembered the first time they met in Heaven Capital more than 3 years ago. At that time, Li Tianlan was still very weak in his eyes. But now Li Tianlan, Di Jiang suppressed his inner emotions and became more focused. But they may not believe it, Li Tianlan said. So, Di Jiang laughed, and his voice was extremely free and easy. I won't have a future. This was the truth. He was no match for Li Tianlan. In today's battle, he and Mount Dibing were destined to fail. Afterward, whether the Wang family of Beihai wanted to save the influence or give an explanation to the outside world, Di Jiang was destined to bear all the infamy and grievances. Di Jiang would not join Emperor Dong's palace. At least now, many people were willing to believe in his loyalty. But after being helplessly given up, sacrificed, wronged, and bearing the infamy by the Wang family of Beihai, who would believe that Di Jiang would be as firm as ever? Maybe they would want to believe it, but many people were not sure. Di Jiang was truly invincible. With another breakthrough of the double thunder veins, he had paved the way to the peak of the invincible realm. Such a person, even if there was a slight possibility of joining East Emperor Palace, would make the Wang family of Beihai uneasy. So he could only die with countless grievances. This was not the will of the Wang family of Beihai. It was the will of the entire Beihai province. So standing here, Di Jiang would not have a future, and he did not need to think about the future. Li Tianlan looked at him, expressionless. We are different, Di Jiang said calmly. I have no future, but you do. You are the chosen one, shining brightly. Your future is unimaginable, so you have to consider a lot of things. The dark blue color continued to spread on him, getting deeper and deeper. The power was compressed to the extreme in the surging. The space twisted with a clear sound. So you dare not kill me, Di Jiang said. But I dare to kill you. Di Jiang took a step forward. For a person who had no future, there was nothing he did not dare to do. There was no declaration of war, no warning. Di Jiang came directly to Li Tianlan with one step. This step crossed a distance of dozens of meters. Wherever he passed, the stable space was completely shattered by the dark thunder. The pure and silent darkness slowly spread. In an instant, the thunder around Di Jiang had become silent and deep black. There was only a fist wrapped in black lightning in front of Li Tianlan. The world was shaking. The extremely violent fist smashed the air with a harsh whistle, and the fierce killing intent shrouded down. There was violent and boiling power everywhere between heaven and earth. At this moment, Di Jiang was completely a giant who could smash everything. Fast, simple, but with pure violence destroying the world. He moved too fast. Li Tianlan seemed to have no time to draw his sword. Facing the thunderous fist, he raised his arm. Forward. Elbow strike. In the darkness, Mount Dibing suddenly sounded a loud dragon roar. Every joint of Li Tianlan's body was shaking wildly. Dragon fist, the dragon shows its head. The hard elbow hit Di Jiang's fist in an instant with a weird curve. The black thunder kept falling and spreading in all directions. The night seemed to be injected with black water. The air was deformed and spread into obvious ripples. Li Tianlan and Di Jiang's figures were almost close together. The moment his elbow hit Di Jiang's fist, his bent arm suddenly stretched out. He clenched his fist. Sprinting. The wind and rain all over the sky, and the black thunder. Li Tianlan's body tightened, and his whole body seemed to be pulled over by this punch. The clenched fist penetrated everything, as fast as lightning. Dragon fist, the azure dragon arrow. The distance between the two was too close. The moment Li Tianlan stretched out his arm, his fist almost touched Di Jiang's Adam's apple. Within the distance of less than 2 centimeters, all the power broke out in the shortest distance in an instant. The breath of death rushed to Di Jiang with a ferocious taste. Di Jiang's upper body suddenly leaned back to the limit. He forcibly blocked Li Tianlan's fist with one hand, and supported the ground with the other hand in the process of leaning back. His legs surrounded by black lightning suddenly galloped like thunder. His body rose horizontally in an instant, spinning wildly. With great power, his legs swept to all the vital parts of Li Tianlan's body without hesitation. Li Tianlan's fist hit the air, and the space was completely shattered in the vibration. The pure power of the two had formed a pseudo-domain infinitely close to the domain of the invincible realm. In the pseudo-domain, Di Jiang's speed was faster, and his power was more and more violent. Close combat. Close combat. This was the cruelest and most dangerous fight, the most violent and purest collision. The power that was enough to destroy everything came down with his legs, like a hurricane. Di Jiang's power was too great, and his speed was too fast, even leaving a lot of afterimages. Li Tianlan's figure swayed slightly in the afterimages, also leaving afterimages. A lot of Di Jiang and a lot of Li Tianlan appeared and disappeared at the same time, dazzling. He still didn't draw his sword. Like a hurricane, his legs swept faster and faster, and his figure suddenly rushed to the sky. He put his fingers together like a sword. His figure crossed the afterimages of Di Jiang, and was quiet in the air for a moment. Just for a moment, he was the king of the world. In an instant, the extremely sharp sword energy suddenly burst out from his closed fingers. An extremely pure dark blue flowing light crossed the air. The Wang family of Beihai. Sword of Emperor Path. Lin Fengting in the distance clearly saw this scene, and his eyes were extremely bitter. Everyone felt extremely complicated when they saw this scene. Li Tianlan. Di Jiang. Di Jiang's leg technique at this time. Li Tianlan's sword light at this time. The fight between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai. At this moment, standing in the Wang family of Beihai, the leg technique Di Jiang used was the unique technique of the Li family. But Li Tianlan used the kendo of the Wang family of Beihai. What kind of complicated entanglement was this? The dark thunderbolt and the dark blue sword light collided wildly. The 13-story building was completely silent. Hands and feet. The pure limbs kept colliding under the most violent power and speed. The afterimages and sword light all over the sky appeared and disappeared. Di Jiang, who had completely entered the fighting state, looked fanatical, and his spirit was getting higher and higher. Li Tianlan's face was getting paler and paler, but his eyes were getting brighter and brighter like stars. His originally extremely swift body movement was getting stronger and stronger. Double fists. Legs. His figure rose into the air, getting faster and faster. Di Jiang's legs had been spinning like a windmill, and the huge force tore the wind and rain, spreading to the field like a storm. Without any dodging, Li Tianlan's legs were also attacking. At this moment, he and Di Jiang were using exactly the same unique technique. This was also the unique technique Li Tianlan knew best. Because this was the Li family's martial arts, the Li family's leg technique. Hurricane kick. A second storm suddenly appeared in the narrow battlefield that had a large area of effect. The gale tore up the ruins of the surrounding buildings. Attack, attack, attack. Their legs attacked at the same time. Head-on. Both sides used the same technique. When they collided, there was no technique. Li Tianlan's arms were covered with blood, and so were his legs. But Di Jiang's state was getting better and more violent. Li Tianlan's movements gradually slowed down, but it was still hurricane kick. Li Tianlan's unique technique didn't change at all. His attack was gradually suppressed by Di Jiang, and his counterattack was getting slower and slower. Without any suspense, when their legs collided again, Di Jiang suddenly roared, and the power of the dual thunder veins that was superior to Li Tianlan's completely broke out. In the pure darkness, like flames and thunderbolts, Li Tianlan's figure was kicked out almost without any room to resist. The wind was whistling in his ears. At that moment, Li Tianlan clearly felt that something that had shrunk for a long time in his body was clearly straightening and slowly pulling in. Di Jiang's figure was getting farther and farther away. Li Tianlan laughed, satisfied and satisfied. Di Jiang also laughed. He didn't know why Li Tianlan fought with him like this. In his opinion, this was simply the stupidest way of fighting. Li Tianlan had the wind and thunder veins, while he had the dual thunder veins. But the martial arts of the Wang family of Beihai was about outbreak. When he broke out with all his strength, his speed was not much slower than Li Tianlan's, but the extreme power brought by the newly broken dual thunder veins was enough for him to completely suppress Li Tianlan. He didn't talk big just now. What he said was true. He had no future, so at this moment, Li Tianlan didn't dare to kill him. But he really dared to kill Li Tianlan. At all costs. Li Tianlan's figure was kicked out, flying in the air and retreating. Di Jiang took a deep breath. Without any hesitation, his body began to run up. His footsteps were getting faster and more violent. The unparalleled power kept shaking the earth. All the ruins within 100 meters were obviously shaking in the process of his sprint. Di Jiang's figure rose into the air. At the same time as him, a bright and dazzling knife light rose into the air. It didn't matter about close combat. It didn't matter about means. This was a battle of life and death. And Di Jiang also had a weapon. Jiang practiced the saber. Di Jiang also practiced the saber. Invincible saber. Eternal time. This was a move of extreme strength. With the support of his dual thunder veins, it was a real fatal move. The knife light tore the air apart and fell down with a long trace. Li Tianlan was also falling. His figure fell to the ground. The skin on his body was completely cracked. His arms and legs were covered with blood, which was black, like the blood clots that had existed in his body for a long time. The knife light fell on the top of his head. Li Tianlan reached out his hand. The fastest. The lightest. The steadiest. He put his palms together. The sharp sound and the huge power all over the sky disappeared completely. Li Tianlan clamped Di Jiang's knife with both hands. Di Jiang opened his eyes wide as if he couldn't believe it. And the hands clamping the blade were also exerting force at the same time. Such power was still not as good as Di Jiang's, but Di Jiang didn't feel much suppression of power. Li Tianlan raised his head, looked at Di Jiang's stunned expression and laughed. His eyes were as bright as cold stars, extremely bright. "Thank you," he said softly. "You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."